All right, cool. Well, let's just start talking about how grateful we are for our fucking nearly 10,000 views. Holy shit.
Yeah, nah, it's crazy, man. The reviews are in, and they fucking hate us. We gotta turn it up. We gotta stop. We gotta stop the show. You ever see Making the Band?
No.
On MTV. It was run by P Diddy, and he would do this thing where every once in a while he'd be like, "All right, I'm shutting the studio down. Since I don't know how to act, we gotta shut the studio down."
That's it. We got one episode out, 10,000 people watched it, and we got a resounding stop this.
Yeah.
No more podcast.
Stop it. Knock it off, please. No more.
In all seriousness, though, the response has been so like overwhelmingly great. I can't believe we got this many views on one episode, like a 2-hour upload.
Right.
We got almost 10,000 people so far watching. And if you're listening at home or watching at home right now, you can tell this is the first one we've recorded since our launch.
Yes.
And it's really exciting. Like you guys have been so nice in the comments. You guys said really great things, and we know we're just getting better at this as we do it. And that's honestly, the first one's one of our worst episodes. So if you like that,
it
good
is
stuff to come. Yeah.
Keeps getting better and better and better. Hey, I've listened to the first one, but like in increments. I don't think I've listened to it completely whole, because I'm just kind of watching it and I'm like, man, it's not rough, but it's kind of rough. Because I know what we do later on. So it was kind of like, damn, if only they knew how good it gets. But they will in a couple weeks.
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited because, and then also the new miniseries we do, we'll get more people on there.
Yeah.
So I think, and we're going to bring on really awesome guests who will bring in new listenership. And I'm really excited for the guest lineup we have for our next miniseries. It's going to be really exciting.
We got a couple really important, we got a couple cool cats, couple cool friends. We know a lot of cool people, guys.
It's true. That's the problem. We know too many cool people, and it's hard to schedule them all into the podcast. Right. We got too many,
especially when they all want to talk about the same shit.
It's true. It's true.
Nobody wants to talk about the Good Family, man. It's rough. I want to.
You know what? But we don't need anyone. We don't need anyone to talk about.
Right?
The Good
Yeah.
Family.
No, we're gonna do that on our own.
Hell yeah. Yeah. So keep an eye out for the Good Family. It's going to be a one-off, probably in a while, but I'm very excited.
It's going to be pretty good.
But seriously, thank you guys so much for listening. It's really exciting, and we're just excited to keep bringing you guys weekly 2-hour conversations about cartoons that say fuck.
Yeah.
I've been watching them for years, it's always been something that fit with all the animated characters that's doing their own bits. With a fry who's in the future and a family guy that sucks. With a father from a hill, a burger family runs them up. The show inspires is the same guy, except he totally say and diverse.
Let's watch cartoons that curse.
Yeah, that's bananas.
That's rough.
What the f*** is up, everyone? Welcome to Cartoons That Curse.
That's the thing.
I'm Johnny. You might know me as Johnny Two Cellos. This is my co-host.
I'm Tariq, Terrific Tariq, head of the Offbeat Kiki fan club, Family Guy apologist, and fuck. I usually have a third thing. Yeah,
biggest fan of the film / Lorette Party. Is that
We're not gonna do this here.
All right, don't look that up. Don't look that up.
No.
Don't verify this. We're here to talk about cartoons that say swear words. Our favorite cartoons that say swear words, also known as adult animated series. We've been talking about Futurama, the original Fox seasons. We are on season 4 right now. If you're following along at home, follow the production order, which you can find on Wikipedia. Do not follow the broadcast order that you find on Hulu, because it's a mess, and you'll be very lost.
And it's, when you look at it in the scope of the way the show is put together, it's a bad way to experience the show.
Yeah, it really is. Other than maybe the season finales being a little more exciting, but other than that, it's like it's they mixed up the show in weird ways, and it's never clearer than seasons 3 and 4, production seasons 3 and 4, which are split up between three different broadcast seasons. It's a mess. It's a complete mess. Some characters get introduced out of order. It's weird.
Yeah, that shit with Dwight was really nuts.
Yeah, his introduction is as a Munchkin in the Wizard of Oz sequence instead of his proper introduction. It's pretty weird.
Yeah, it sucks.
So we're here to talk about the final Fox season of Futurama, season 4, a very strong season, some of the best episodes of television in this season. And it's been a fun rewatch. This is like, I've rewatched the show a number of times, but watching through it with Tariq and discussing it every week has been really fun and rewarding. And it's given me, I think is this the first time you're watching through the show in the proper order?
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, yeah, because it's funny because I was thinking about it. I remember last episode, I think I kept talking about how like I was looking forward to season 4 because I know a lot of my favorites were here.
Yeah,
and when I think about it, season 4 was the only Futurama season I owned. So it's technically the only season I watched in order before.
Right.
And I owned that season, so a lot of these episodes I kind of lived with for a while. And I think that's probably where some of my attachment comes. But even then, there's some in here that I like that kind of slipped my mind or like have things that I didn't even realize and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's been dope.
Yeah. I think that was the thing we were talking about is it's interesting because I always said season 3 was my favorite. Season 4 is really close, but both of these seasons kind of have like a real mix of just like bangers and not so bangers, someone that are just kind of mid. I mean, when it's this classic Futurama, so every episode has funny stuff in it. Like usually the worst it gets is just fine. But it is funny how it does feel like there's a pretty split down the middle where it's like, oh, half of these rule and the other half are pretty good. They're fine.
Yeah. There was a certain point in this watch for this season where I was kind of like, oh, what's going on? Like because like I said, I kind of was like, yeah, season 4 that has the good ones, and then like when we started it, I was like, wait, what the fuck? It's not like the episodes were bad by any means, but I was like, I'm not laughing. Like I was like, what's going on? But it took a while to get to those all-timers because the highs, just like season 3 though, the highs of season 4 are really fucking high. Like really, like beyond Futurama high, like television. You know what I mean? Like that. So that's kind of what's cool about the show in general, but that's what's really cool about this season.
Agreed. I really do think that easily some of the best episodes of the whole show and some of my favorite episodes of television are in this season. I have an inkling feeling that there's one episode of this show that tends to be considered the best. At least it's the most memorable. And I have a feeling that neither of us have that at the top of our list here. But we'll get to that in a bit.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you are correct. We'll get there.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's like it's probably the most talked about episode, so we'll get into it. But let's start off with the first episode. Kif gets knocked up a notch. This is the episode, as the title suggests, Kif gets pregnant. And then the big reveal is that it's not through Amy, it's actually through Leela. This isn't a cheating situation because Kif gets pregnant through skin contact when certain hormones are triggered in his body or whatever. So that's kind of the big that happens. That's kind of a minimal part of the plot, though. I would say the whole plot is mostly about Amy like adjusting to the idea of being a mother when she's not ready for it.
Yeah, they do kind of they dive into that more than I remember them doing. The stuff with Amy, and I do find that stuff really interesting. I don't know how you feel about this one, but this one was like another like weak opener for me. I was realizing how much like I'm 1000% a fan of Kif and Amy and their relationship and how they play off each other, and they're really sweet. And everything about them is really sincere and it works really, really well. but I just don't think I like their solo episodes.
You know what? I think I would agree. I mean, I guess there's really only two.
Right.
I guess Amazon Women in the Mood kind of counts. It's not a solo episode, but it is a focus on them. I would say that's probably the best episode that is about them. But yeah, like Where the Buggalo Roam, which is both of our least favorite of the previous season.
Man, even the Titanic one, which is barely about them, but
it's literally like a tag on the end of the episode where it's like, oh, Kif and Amy. It's like not really even about them at all. But yeah, like this one, you know, I mean, it's written by Bill Odenkirk, one of my favorite Futurama writers, and it's directed by Wes Archer. Like, great, like it's great talent. There's really good people on here, but sometimes sometimes they just don't do it for you. And this one is always a little bit forgettable for me, even though it's got some really funny stuff. I really like the hollow shed being like going crazy, and all of the historical figures coming out of the hollow shed and like attacking people. I thought that was fun. But yeah, it's like a little bit of a forgettable opener.
Right. Yeah, like even like all of my notes even are just like really minuscule stuff. And this is I'm gonna say this for a couple episodes, but like I didn't have any like audible laughs in this one. You know what I mean?
Right.
There was definitely stuff I noticed where I was like, okay, that's new. Like, is that they sweep it under the rug, but he has a hairpiece.
That's right. Yeah, he does.
Because he's holding it and shit. Yeah. And it's like really messed up. After I forget what was going on, but yeah, he has a fucking hairpiece. They don't even.
Yeah, it's because they're almost getting sucked out of the ship, and you see it waving when they're getting sucked out.
Yeah, that's what it is.
One thing I did notice is that they were really attentive to detail in that opening part, because the opening part is when Kif gets pregnant and he's flying out the airlock, like, or out the hole in the ship, and he's grabbing onto everyone as he goes down. And that's why they didn't know who got him pregnant, because they're like, oh, he touched everyone on his way out. But if you actually look at the scene very carefully, he only touches Leela's skin. He doesn't touch anybody else's skin. So they were very,
he like grabs Fry's jacket, I think, and stuff like that. Yeah, that's really good.
Exactly. I like, you know, this is a show that's known for that kind of attention to detail. So, you know, it's cool to see that even in an episode that doesn't stand out too much to me, to see those kind of things shine through. They're really careful about that stuff. It's cool.
I wrote down that they don't update irons in the future. They give Amy a fucking ironing board, and it looks like the one in my living room. Right, like it's exactly the same.
There's so much stuff like that, and I think it's partially just because in Futurama, despite the fact that they're trying to give us a story set in the future, they're still to a degree trying to satirize modern day. Like a lot of the stories are supposed to be parallels to modern day. So
yeah, it's like a Flintstones thing.
Right. It feels like, you know, what I would have expected out of a Futurama episode for that situation is like, oh, there's an ironing robot who comes in and will iron your shit for you. That makes a lot of sense, but it wouldn't fit with what they were trying to do with Amy's story, which is like, oh, she's going to be in charge of the ironing now that she's got to be in like motherhood mode. Or whatever.
So they gave us like a universal symbol that we know in present day to kind of articulate that.
Yeah, exactly. Which, you know, I forgive that kind of stuff when it serves the characters and story. It feels like it works. But sometimes it is like, it does kind of take you out where you're just like, man, we don't even have that now. It's like 20 years 20 years after the show, you know, like that's been obsolete for 10 years, and they apparently have it in the year 3004. But the second episode, I think we should talk about the second episode, which is an all-timer, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Leela's Homeworld. This is the one where we finally discover the truth about Leela's parents, which is just there was so much buildup over the show over these 4 seasons about Leela not knowing where she's from, what kind of alien she is, or where her parents were, and they just like super delivered on this episode. I really love, especially the emotional aspect of Leela discovering the truth and the reasoning behind her being an orphan. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, this one is a classic. This is one of the ones I think of when I think of Futurama. It's really, it's just really, really good. And upon the rewatch, I did realize, I'm like, oh, this one isn't, it's not like without jokes, but it's not really funny.
Yeah.
But the heart like saves it and it carries it the whole way through. And
Mm-hmm.
regardless if you're laughing or not, you're still invested in what's going on and what's happening to Leela. And I admire that about it. I really like that. There's still some good lines in it. I wrote down, "We can kill ourselves when we get home." I like that. I like that a lot. And
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Please, I was gonna get into a something completely different.
Let me do one of my favorite jokes in the episode that struck me this time, and it was when she's finding all of the stuff that's been like stolen from her over the years that she like flushed down the toilet or whatever, and she's trying to figure out like, why are these people spying on me, and she's asking them, and she says, am I in an even more boring Truman Show? Which,
yeah, what the hell was that?
So basically this line is implying that whoever wrote this episode, or whoever wrote that joke, thinks that the Truman Show is boring. They specified an even more boring Truman Show.
I saw because I watched this episode a couple days after, because this was on my brain because of that joke. A couple days, I saw this episode a couple days after I sent you that clip from fucking Drawn Together where Foxy Brown, she's like, oh, she puts on, she's like, wow, it's the King of the Hill, it was King of the Hill helmet or some shit. She put the helmet on.
Like football helmets or something.
Yeah, and she puts the helmet on. She just kind of stands there, and she's like, wow, it's almost as boring as being in the actual show. And it's like, fam.
I don't know. I don't know if, like, can Drawn Together take that jab? Like,
no. No.
Like, yeah.
Drawn Together's fine, but no, relax, guys.
That's kind of how I felt about this. You're right. Like, even though I love Futurama a lot, but I'm like, man, they're punching up at the Truman Show. That's like a beloved film. Yeah, it's a beloved film. Yeah. But I thought that was funny. I thought that was interesting. But yeah, like the core of this episode that makes it so engaging is definitely just like that mystery of who are these people. And it's not even the mystery. It's just the journey of her learning, because they reveal it to us at the end of the first act. Because at the end of the first act, it's like she's like looking up and she's like, I just wish I knew where I was from. And then they pan down. It was really smart. So the whole time we know who her parents are. It's not explicitly stated, but it's like very much implied. Like, oh, there they are. They're in the sewer. Right. So the whole episode is us following her journey to learn the truth versus us learning the mystery along with her. Which I think was a really smart way to tell the story, because we're just waiting for her to figure it out, you know?
Right. Yeah, man, I really appreciate a lot of the stuff that this one does. And Leela's voice actress, her large rant where she thinks that like they killed her parents is really, really, really well. Like the performance is insane. Like it's really good. Like you can feel like the emotion. You can feel the fact that Leela's literally been waiting for something like this her entire life, and to find out that they're dead, and the person that like that the people that literally made her life the way that it is are standing right in front of her. Like what she feels like they basically ruined her life. It's like,
right.
You feel that weight. I noticed that immediately through that performance. I was like, wow, this is really great. And
shout out to Katie Seagal. She's I love her performance as Leela. She's so good in this show.
Yeah. And the montage at the end is fucking,
it's the best.
Man, the Baby Love Child record is so good. It's so good.
I just also really appreciate that they really made the reason that they sent her to the orphanarium like really empathetic and understandable. Like they gave us a really good reason behind them feeling the need to do this, and it's because, you know, they knew living in the sewer that they're like these marginalized people and they don't get to live a full free life, and so they're like, well, it's gonna hurt us the most to say goodbye to you, but like you can pass on the surface. They'll think you're just an alien, which is great. Although we don't talk enough about how fucking crazy, like it's super fucked up that the mutants are supposed like need to live in
I
the
started
sewer.
thinking about that because they introduced Leela's parents. You spend more time with the mutants this season. You
Yep.
spend more time with the mutants this season than you do ever in the entire
Yeah.
show. And that really got me thinking about it. I was like, yo, this is fucked up. Like, they can't go to the surface not because of anything. It's just they like, oh, nah, they're ugly. It's like, what
Yeah.
the fuck? Like, it is really wild. Like, it's really insane.
Really fucked up. And even like our main characters who we love are just like like talking shit about like the mutants, like, oh, these disgusting mutants can't come up on the surface.
I remember when it clicked. I don't know what episode it was, but it was Amy. Amy said, like,
yep,
they're mutants and they're idiots. She literally says something like that.
It was in Less Than Hero because Leela was getting them a pass to come up on the surface to see
go.
them. And so she brings that up. They do address this later in the show. So like, down the line when we cover the revival seasons, there is an episode that is it's actually the 100th episode of the show. They directly address this issue in the show. Which, maybe a little late to the party, but still, it's still, it's overall though, like I love how they characterized this sacrifice that her parents made. Like they really did a great job making you empathize with them and their struggle to have to do that. And then also it's a very understandable scenario where like Leela, she understands, she gets why her parents did what they did. And now she's like, all of a sudden there's this whole new world where she's like, well, I got to live up on the surface and I'm free to do that. But also now I have my parents back and I can like start experiencing life with them again for the first time.
Right. Yeah.
And then, yeah, like you said, that montage at the end, like the idea that they were really always there watching out for her, even though she didn't know it, is damn. It's one of the best emotional beats in the show.
Yeah. I love it. I love it so much. It's really well put together. And they do it all the way till the end, man. Like they like tuck her in at night, like as she's like a full grown adult. Like it's really sweet.
Yeah, it's sweet. And I'm glad they got a couple, we'll talk about them later in this episode, but we got a couple episodes that were after this one that were about her and her parents, like to a degree.
Right.
So, and then we get more in the revivals and stuff and we see them a little bit in the movies, but, I like that kind of progression in these shows that aren't necessarily serialized shows. They're more episodic shows, but there are still serialized elements that need to be followed. And, even though this stuff was shown out of order, they couldn't have shown Less Than Hero or Teenage Mutant Leela's Hurdles before Leela's Homeworld. Everyone would have been super
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Like, I really appreciate the fact that they didn't fuck that up. Like, they didn't really care about Dwight, because I guess he doesn't really matter. But, like, with this, like, they didn't mess this up. Like, they at least, regardless of whatever weird scattered order they got the show in, anything that has to do with Leela and her identity is intact. It's in the correct spacing. Like, you don't just randomly get Less Than Hero 5 episodes before you even find out that she's a mutant. You know what I mean? So, that's really good.
I'm
sure that
the writers and producers were like really adamant to Fox. They're like, hey, you can't show this episode before this episode. Yeah. Like they got to put their foot down
everything
somewhere.
Else.
Yeah.
But whatever you do this one right here, you got to relax.
For sure. All right, let's go on to 403, Love and Rocket, the episode where Bender starts dating the Planet Express ship. How do you feel about this one? Love and Rocket, Valentine's Day episode.
This one feels like a fucking Treehouse of Horror. Like, it's like really weird and out of the format of the show, kind of. It reminded me of, we said the same thing about the Honkening. Like,
yeah, that's right.
It's just kind of like, this isn't, the ship has never spoken. Like, it's so weird. Like, it's like, and you just randomly establish and then it doesn't come back. Like, you establish it and we deal with it here and then it just doesn't show up again. It just doesn't come back. I remember this one, but it was another one that like slipped my mind when rewatching the season. I was like, oh yeah, they do this. And this is where you get screwed on the broadcast order. When we were doing season 3, I watched half of this one by accident.
Right.
And then I was like, wait, what the fuck? I'm not even supposed to be watching this. But I remember thinking, why do I not like this that much? Like, what is going on? And I was like, oh, I'm in the wrong season. And then when I came back to finally watch it again, I was like, yeah, I'm still kind of not feeling this one that much.
I agree. Like, I think there's some stuff in this episode that's really good, but like you said, it is really weird to establish this autopilot ship like AI or whatever, and then introduce, like, I don't dislike the idea itself. I don't
Right.
dislike the idea of Bender dating a ship's AI. I think that's kind of interesting, but to introduce it in this episode and it's never been a thing is like, I don't know. I feel like a show these days wouldn't do that unless they were to, like, they could have also just installed the ship's AI in this episode. You know what I mean?
Problem
like, that's a really
solved.
easy fix. Right.
Fuck?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they made it seem like it was
with Bender arguing with it. Like, that's just how it starts. Yeah.
It's really weird. But there are some fun things in it. Like when they get to the Romanticorp place, I really liked, it was really messed up, but I thought the idea that they genetically engineered those stuffed animals and they're real and then they stuff them afterwards is like, A, really messed up, but B, like feels like a pretty smart indictment of like just like corporations and corporate America. It's like, oh, whatever we can do to save a buck, even if it's like super inhumane. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
And this is another episode where I think I've only really brought this up one time, but like this happens a lot. It's another episode where Leela thinks Fry is dead at the very end. And that happens so much. It happens so much in this show. I do like that moment though, where like Leela's running out of air. She's not paying attention and Fry just like sacrifices himself, gives her his air. And you know, it's very Fry sacrificing his own well-being for the sake of Leela.
That stuff is really sweet. Yeah, I think that stuff is really sweet.
Agreed. I also really liked the line, because this is very Bender. When after everything's over, I think Bender says, "What crazy thing am I going to date next?" which is like a question that I'm asking about him all the time. I'm like, yeah, I was thinking about it. Like, what does he date next? Probably something weird.
He opens his chest and Lucy Liu's still there. And I was like, I'm like, so Bender's still been with Lucy Liu the whole time. But she's just kind of been in there. It's really fucking wild.
Yeah, it's a funny callback. And I remember listening to the commentary back in the day and they said that they had recorded, they were so far ahead on the scripts that they had the foresight to record that line when they had Lucy Liu in for that previous episode. So they got that ahead of time. They figured it out. That's pretty good.
And they bent so many rules to tell this story. Like I get, you know, the show is kind of flexible, right? Like it kind of does follow the same rubber band reality thing that Matt Groening preaches about on The Simpsons.
Right.
But they bent a lot because we talked about the fact that the ship hasn't talked before or since, which is like, all right, whatever. But then when the ship shows up to look for Bender, Fry just has a gigantic fucking window that was never there before with a doorbell on the outside.
Right.
Like,
I
was, what the hell are they doing?
It was a funny visual though to see the ship at the window.
Pretty funny.
Like, hey, yeah.
It is pretty funny.
But it is funny how many things they bent for this episode. It was a lot. I think my favorite part of the episode is the end though. I love afterwards when they dump all of the hearts into that, like into the quasar, and it creates that beautiful effect. And then you get the Zoidberg voiceover, and he says that it destroyed many, many planets. Doing that destroyed a bunch of planets, but from Earth it was beautiful. And there's that really nice shot of like Leela and Fry looking up at this beautiful nebula quasar thing. And then of course Zoidberg with his arms around them, which is really
nice, I like that. You know, I like that a lot.
Yeah, you don't see that often. You don't see them actually being like, oh yeah, Zoidberg, let's get in here, Zoidberg.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, it's a weird episode. Like you said, feels a little bit like a Treehouse of Horror or a What If Machine type of episode. And it's, you know, like all of these, funny stuff, but not near the top of my list.
Right.
All right, let's go on to 404, Less Than Hero, the one when Fry, Leela, and Bender become superheroes. I fucking loved this episode as a kid. I remember as a kid, like this was like, oh, this is fucking great. This is so funny. It's also the first time we mentioned this is the first ep where we really explore Leela's relationship with her parents, which I think was actually a really smart move because um, one of the things a lot of superhero stories do is that these people have to balance their regular life with their
That's
superhero
true.
work,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what this episode is about, with Leela now having to balance her new relationship with her parents and her uh, um, admittedly optional superhero career. She chose to be the
Yeah.
superhero, but um, the more I have watched this episode though over the years, the less impact it's had on me.
Mm.
It was really funny when I was a kid, and I still think there's a lot of really funny stuff in it. But this is not my favorite one anymore. Like back in the day, I was like, this is a banger, and now it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
oh, this is fine. This is pretty good.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. That's exactly how I felt. Like even down to loving it as a kid when I realized it was this season. I was like, okay, I remember this one being really, really funny. And it is funny, but
Yeah,
it's not really, really funny. It did give me my first audible laugh of the season. When they say, I
I
feel
think I
like
have
I
it
was
written
mauled
down
by
too.
Jesus.
Yep, I have that written down.
I like that
There's
one a lot.
actually a handful of jokes that I think are really funny. I love when they first get mugged by the dude, and they beat him up, and they throw him into the alley, and he goes, "Oh man, foiled again!" And after years of planning, so this guy was
Yes, yes. It's really
planning this
good.
mugging for years. So stupid. And then I loved that they. I liked when they were discovering that they had powers, and they were looking at the like cream that gives them the powers, and he goes, and Fry says, you'd think it would be something you have to freebase in order to get the superpowers," which was not a joke I remembered, and feels like almost a little more risque than you would expect on a Fox animated
Yeah,
sitcom.
that joke is nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. But to me, the highlight of the episode is I love the zookeeper and them yelling "Citizen Snips" like when they're running down all of the different animals that the zookeeper uses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was an elephant that never forgets to kill, and Citizen Snips, a seldom used crab named Citizen Snips.
I like when they think that they have the power to call sea creatures, and they're like, "Hey, Zoidberg, get in here!" He's like, "Screw you!" It's like, oh, I guess we don't got that.
Yeah, that was perfect. But overall, I do think the best thing about this episode is that you're getting a little bit more of that Leela and her parents aspect in the story. Like the superhero stuff is fun. I loved it when I was a kid. It's funny. There are some funny things in this episode, but like when I think back on it, that was something that I'm glad they did, is like really start to explore her relationship with their parents in a way that maybe not a way you would expect. I don't think you would expect the first episode for them to really explore that relationship to be a superhero episode.
Right.
But it kind of works. Like that
Yeah.
aspect I think kind of works, where like her
Definitely.
superhero work is getting in the way of that new relationship.
It's really light and it's really fun, and I think that's a good way to go about it. They incorporate some interesting stuff, like about Leela's parents, especially early on, have this really kind of, they're just really happy to have and see their daughter. So they don't challenge anything. They don't tell her about herself. If they're disappointed, they instantly go, "Well, yeah, we're mutants, so yeah, it's our fault." Like, and they just kind of take everything like that.
Right.
And that's when you really start. This is the first time you really start to see that. And Leela kind of is like, "No, challenge me. Like, it's okay if you're mad. Like, I promise." And
Right.
this is where we find out Leela's breath stinks, because they say, like, I think they say like try flossing or something like that. Like,
I like when she reveals to them that she's Clobberella, and she rips off her normal tank top, and her costume for Clobberella's under it, which doesn't make any sense given how much of her body the like normal outfit covers. It doesn't
Right.
They don't cover the same things at all, and then she rips off the costume and it's her normal
Yeah.
outfit again.
Yeah.
It's a good gag. It's just a good gag. But I also loved the reveal of how the information of who Leela's Clobberella gets out, which is Morris. What is he? He says it to he whispers to someone, and then you see there's a mutant with giant ears. He's like, that guy's daughter's Clobarella. Don't tell anyone though. And then it's a guy with a giant mouth.
Gotcha.
Even
before that though, they're just like they're fishing, and then he's like, it's just super silent. He's like, yeah. So anyway, like my daughter's Clobarella. They're like, oh, we look like this. Like, whoa.
That's so funny. The other funny thing though is that like Clobarella has one eye, and not many people on the surface have one eye.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Mayor Poopenmeyer was talking to Leela, and then Leela leaves, and then Clobarella comes in. Shouldn't be that hard to connect those dots.
Isn't it? Fry almost gives a girl his birth certificate.
Yeah.
Which I don't remember, but that joke is extremely, not even just the joke, but that entire conversation is really, really on the nose. Like, she's like, you can't give people your identity. He's like, give several reasons why. Like, what even is going on at this point?
Man, I love how stupid Fry can be sometimes. He's the best. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to 405, A Taste of Freedom. Cool. This is the episode where Zoidberg eats the Earthican flag on Freedom Day, and then everyone gets real mad at him about it, and they take him to court. This is the third in the Waterfall saga. The old man.
I quoted this time.
Yeah.
I quoted this time. Yeah.
So this one we have Old Man Waterfall, who is a polygamist, which apparently in the future is still looked down upon, which I can't imagine will be true.
No, no, and they do the wildest. The entire courtroom is homophobic. He's like, I can't wait to tell my husband. They're like, they just yell boo louder. It's like, Jesus.
You can really tell sometimes that this show was made in 2000, in the early 2000s. Like it's, there's you know, and fortunately, it's not a show where a lot of that stuff is like very overt and like eroded, like, you know, ingrained in the DNA of the show. It's mostly like offhanded jokes that are just like, bummer. But you know, every time it happens, you're just like, ooh, was a different time. I can't believe that was like, it feels like it's not that long ago. That
one is a little different than like some stuff we'll end up talking about later, because you can kind of argue that the joke is on the courtroom, right? Like the joke is on the prejudice of the court, because the joke starts out as the fact they're really, really upset just because he has multiple partners. Then when he says husband, they get even more upset. It's like, oh, this is just like a shitty courtroom. Like that. I think that's more what they're going for with that one.
I hope. You know, it's hard to tell.
I do. I hope too. You can never know. We weren't there.
Like,
I do hope so.
Even thinking back on it, because like, I mean, I guess the thing is that this is set in the future, and so like, you know, maybe the writers didn't expect these, like maybe the writers expected these things to feel the same. But I think if you compare this to something like in like season 1 of South Park, there's an episode, Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride. And the whole episode is about Stan learning from Big Gay Al about like being gay, about homosexuality, and like how it's totally fine. And that's like the whole message of the episode. And it's like, oh wow, this is in 1998. South Park was doing this. That's like, it's kind of wild. And then at the end of the episode, when Stan comes to the rest of the town and is like, and he basically tells them all what he's learned, the town is like pissed. They're pissed about it, which is at that point like a pretty accurate assessment of the culture at the time, you know, in the late 90s. But it stands out in a show like Futurama, where it's set in the year 3004, and it's like, oh man, there's really still like, that's it's not even a thing now, you know.
Yeah.
How did you feel overall about this episode? It's a pretty good, fun Zoidberg episode. It's not one of my favorite ones, but I think it has some fun Zoidberg lore.
This one was really forgettable for me. Like,
really?
Yeah, man. I was, first of all, I did forget that it existed, and even just watching it, I was like, I didn't have any really big laughs. I think my biggest laugh might have been the literally the text in the beginning where it says Futurama, or is it? Like, I thought that was really funny. But other than that, it's just kind of, it is just kind of I don't know. I don't want to call it like an empty one or anything like that, but it is just kind of it was one of those ones that just was kind of there. There was another line I wrote down, a red lobster that won't ruin your dinner. I was like,
I can
somebody
relate to
must
that.
be pissed.
I've gotten sick at Red Lobster before, so I appreciate that one.
Everybody's been sick at every restaurant, and it's so funny. Every time a restaurant comes up, I hear at least one like, "Oh yeah, no, that shit gave me food poisoning, and I was in the bathroom for like
Right.
6 days." It's like, geez, damn. I did want to ask you, because you're the one that got me thinking about this because of your video. So, and it's been a while since I've seen a video, so I don't remember if this was addressed. Is this the worst thing Zoidberg's ever done, or is it still the ship thing?
See, the thing is that I don't personally, I don't see what Zoidberg did in this episode as bad. Like, I think he's in the right here. Like, I think if this planet is touting like the freedom, and then everyone gets mad because he ate a flag, I feel like this is more pointing out the hypocrisy of that idea. It's actually more of an indictment on America. Like, how Americans like, we're the land of the free, but don't you dare put that flag on the ground.
This is one of those ones that's kind of more relevant now. I think about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. For reasons we don't have to talk about, but it is.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is. And what I do think stands out about this episode is that despite the fact that Zoidberg, in my opinion, has been super wronged by Earth and by his friends and by like all of these people on this planet that he has like considered his home, and that he has like not only considered his home, but he has talked enthusiastically about his love of the planet and how much he loves the freedom that it provides. And then all of a sudden, for him to do one thing and those people to turn on him like that, to the point where they're taking him to court. And then despite this, at the end, even though his home planet wants to, actually, spark war with Earth, he ultimately says no, and he saves the day, and he saves like his friends and the Earth from his own home planet. So to me, like, it's another instance of Zoidberg doing the right thing, where even though he's been wronged pretty immensely by these people, he doesn't even in that instance, he doesn't take it out on them. You know what I mean? He does the right thing and saves them in the end. And at the end, they all come around. They're like, "You're right. You saved us. This is freedom. Eat the flag. Eat the flag." At the end,
Right. I think the only reason I wrote that down as a question was just because of how upset it made everyone. Because,
right.
But that again, Zoidberg, that wasn't Zoidberg's intention. Zoidberg was just so moved by the motion of freedom, that he just kind of just wanted to do something on impulse because he felt like he had the freedom to do so. Right. So yeah, I agree. I think that might be the only reason I considered, even because I don't know. At that point, this episode, I have so much little to say about it that like I was just kind of like, all right, what can I? What's something I'm thinking about here? The only other thing that stood out
that led to some good conversation about Zoidberg and like and freedom in general.
Yeah,
pretty interesting.
The Freedom Podcast. Is this the? See, episode title. This episode is called the Freedom Episode. This episode of Cartoons That Curse is called the Freedom Episode. One of the guys from Zoidberg's planet, when he disguises himself, he calls himself Human, and I think that's really good.
I love that bit, especially because it's an instance of Zap being the stupidest person on the planet, yet in charge of everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And not only does he not see through the very obvious disguise of Human, but he then chastises Kif and says like, "This guy's gunning for your job, Kif." And he's like,
just might get it.
as he's leaving the ship with the security codes to go back to the Decapodians. Classic idiot Zap Brannigan. And then of course Old Man Waterfall dies at the end, and we see Frida Waterfall, who we will see once again in one of the Futurama movies. I won't spoil which one.
Oh, no.
All right, so that's forgettable for you. I still think it's pretty middle of the road for me, but I think there's some good stuff within.
I get
And
you.
then, but let's move on to Bender Should Not Be Allowed on TV, which is the one where Bender plays Antonio Calculon Jr. on All My Circuits. This is another one I really liked as a kid. Thought this was really funny.
Same.
Let me ask you something. I thought
Yeah.
about this while I was watching this because I was looking through it and I noticed that this, in broadcast order, is the second to last episode of the whole show.
Yeah.
Do you think this was a jab by Fox running up to the end of the run of Futurama to like, we're going to air the episode called Bender Should Not Be Allowed on TV as one of the last episodes of Futurama that ever aired?
I didn't even do the science. I didn't even do the science. Damn. I could see that. I could see them being really pissed off.
Oh, man.
Fox sucks. The fact that would even be like a thought in your brain and be like, yeah, man, what if the network is that petty? The fact that sounds plausible for them should be enough to say like, yeah, that might actually be what it was. Because I shouldn't even be thinking like that.
Right. I know. That's the thing. Like, I don't want to believe that was the case, but I'm like, but that's a little weird that this is the second to last episode. The final. Yeah.
It's a weird place for it. Yeah.
This is the first episode with Everybody Loves Hypnotoad. I forgot how late into the run it was that we got our first Everybody Loves Hypnotoad episode.
Yeah, because Hypnotoad is just at the show.
Yep. He was before this. We only saw him in Luck of the Friarish. It's
Luck of the Friarish, yeah.
Right? No, not Luck of the Friarish. Not Luck of the Friarish. The Day the Earth Stood Stupid. Day the Earth Stood Stupid is what is the first Hypnotoad episode because it's the pet show.
Right. Oh, okay. So that's the one the pet show opens with. So wait, what does Luck of the Friarish open with? Oh, that's the horse one.
The horse track. Yeah, the horse track.
Got it.
They're both at animal events. That's why I mixed them up.
Right. That's why I was like, where does it start?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I love the Everybody Loves Hypnotoad gag, and then they just like kind of kept running with it after this. But it's like it's a funny idea. Like the idea, we know what the Hypnotoad is. We know his bit. So like, yeah, he's got a TV show where he literally just hypnotizes the audience. That's pretty fun.
Right.
It's a pretty good idea. I just wrote down in all caps, Dwight gets baked.
Yeah, I wrote that joke down too. It's pretty fucking. We talked about it before. I don't remember what season it was, and we talked about the fact that there's just so many Rastafarian weed references within whenever Hermes appears, and that's the wildest one because. Number one, that is the biggest blunt I have ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah,
like
fat. Because it's a fat blunt.
He pulls it out. He's like, "Yeah, I stole this from my dad." And he puts it in his mouth and he lights. He says, "Check it out, I'm Bender," and he throws up immediately.
Immediately. Vomits everywhere.
And
it's also
Hermes
funny.
is like, "It's not a cigar." And it's not mine.
It's not mine.
It's in his pocket, and it just the smoke comes out of his pocket like it's so layered. It's like, what are you doing?
The funniest thing though is before this, I don't think there was ever an instance where we saw his weed. It was all references to, and so not only do they show it for the first time, but they have a child smoke the fattest blunt I've ever seen on Fox television.
Yeah,
and then he, I guess it was like. They made him vomit everywhere immediately, so it's not like they glamorized it or anything. And the whole episode is literally about not glamorizing the things you see on television. So I guess you can kind of get away with it. Like the message of that scene is literally don't do what you see on television. So maybe that gave them a little more leeway with the Fox censors, but I can't imagine that they could have gotten away with that kind of overt weed reference in 2004 in any other episode. Yeah. These days, you can do whatever you want. Weed's on the table.
This is free reign. Yeah, they sing a song called "Bag of Weed" on Family Guy. Like it doesn't matter anymore. It does not matter. Man.
Isn't there a Family Guy where Brian gets caught with weed?
Yeah, there's a lot of weed stuff with Brian, and then there's that one with Peter smokes crack. You ever see that one? That one is.
I don't think so.
Because. Oh fuck! I was talking about Family Guy. There's a. It's so funny though because
add another notch. To
the counter. Yeah, you're right. I did it again. There's a really, really, really funny gag. I don't even remember what the episode is and what's going on. I just know that Peter is doing like a whole lot of stuff, he doesn't have to do. And he's in the living room and Brian walks in. He's like, Peter, what are you doing? And he has just like a crack pipe. And he's like, crack? And Brian's like, what the like, what?
Oh
and
my
then
God.
I think it just kind of it cuts to later on, and Peter's just on the floor, cracked out, like holding the couch cushion. He's like, government came and took my baby. It's like, fam. And that's only a couple years later. So, yeah.
That was only a couple years after this?
Yeah, that was one of the earlier revivals seasons.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
Family Guy's wild. We'll talk about Family Guy on this podcast at some point, or every episode at some point. We'll probably be brought up by Tariq, but we'll also talk about the show itself at some point, which will be an interesting revisit. It'll be interesting.
I can't wait to Family Guy supremacy is coming, and I am at the head of the helm.
I have a feeling that a lot of the audience will not agree with you.
Yeah, no, they won't, and it's okay because I'll be in here laughing up a storm. It's my favorite podcast episode.
I think that's what's gonna be. I think that's what's gonna be fun about talking about it, though, is like knowing
that no one cares. Yes, we did the poll. Family Guy was like the lowest thing. I'm like, man, they don't even know. They don't even
know. Is there anything else? My favorite thing about this episode, sorry to just jump back into the episode away from Family Guy, because we're going to talk about Family Guy at a later date, I promise. But let's talk about Futurama now. With this one, my favorite stuff in this episode is often has to do with All My Circuits.
Yes.
And less so Bender's role on All My Circuits. Like, I think it's a funny idea that Bender has kind of taken over All My Circuits. Like, he has become the star of the show because he's just so bombastic and silly. But I vastly prefer the over the top,
the tongue in cheek
of the soap opera genre with robots. I love that stuff.
Yeah, I 1000% agree, because again, like as a kid, that's what was funny. It was Bender coming here and wrecking All My Circuits and doing all this really loud stuff. That's what was really, really funny about this one. But yeah, as I've gotten older, it is the really, really on the nose stuff with Calculon and Monique and stuff. And also, okay, so All My Circuits is apparently filmed live because, Buddy, he kind of freaks out. Like he kind of, he like malfunctions in the middle of the show, and they see it live.
Yeah, and it's on TV, yeah.
Right. However, when Bender's on, they yell cut, and Calculon's like, yeah, we'll fix it in editing. Like, he does all of that, so it's not live anymore. And then with the Hypno, that everybody loves Hypnotoad, which I do think is 1000% a joke, and I think it's a really, really funny joke, is that in the middle of All My Circuits, when Buddy malfunctions, they say, we interrupt this to bring you Everybody Loves Hypnotoad already in progress. But it wasn't even on. They just put the damn show
so on. Weird. Yeah, future broadcasting is weird, especially because and that's another funny thing is like we're talking about the things that don't exist anymore. Like, there's no way broadcast television is going to exist like it does now in the year 3000.
Absolutely not. Yeah,
it's barely going to exist 10 years from now. We're gonna be all over. We're gonna be all over the internet. But I it's fucked up. But the ending beat of Bender's final speech makes me laugh, even though it's so fucked up. Where you ever just think about sitting your kids down really and hitting them?
It's really. But we're so busy. Well, make time. Really, I think it's funny. I think it's really, really funny.
It's so funny because it's like not what you're expecting. You're thinking Bender's gonna be like, it's your job to parent your kids. It's not television's job. And instead he's just like, have you ever thought about hitting your children?
Yeah. Yeah, this episode, man, it is funny. We're like laughing at a bunch of bits. It is still really funny. It's just kind of less funny now than it was back then, but it's still really, really,
Yeah.
really funny. And
Yeah.
it does kind of feel like a Simpsons episode dressed in Futurama clothing. It kind of feels like Bart gets famous a little
Oh
bit.
yeah, I feel
Uh,
that.
it doesn't have the same moral by any means, but it's kind of Bart gets famous meets Itchy and Scratchy and Marge.
Right.
Because that stuff with Marge and Itchy and Scratchy is kind of
Is it? Is it?
reminiscent of.
Maybe it's got a little bit of Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie in there too, with the new character being introduced
They
to the
do.
show.
Yeah, they mixed 3 Simpsons
Yeah.
episodes, and that's
Yeah.
what you get. You get this one, and I do think it's really funny. I like how Bender turns on himself. I really like who does that guy think I am?
Yeah. Yeah.
All that stuff is really
Yeah, that's
good.
good.
And the cover at the end. The cover at the end is rad.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a pretty fun episode, but like you said, it really spoke to me as a kid, and it's got some funny stuff still. I mean, I feel like we say this about every episode we don't like. We're just like, it's still funny, but
Right, because I don't want to say any of these sucks. Any of these suck.
Yeah.
There's only one that I kind of actually think sucks, and that's
yeah,
Bugalo. But
Bugalo
and then there's another one that's coming up
that we're
where
gonna
it's
talk
like
about.
it sucks fundamentally.
Yeah, we'll get there. It's coming.
But yeah, no, this is fun, and I know we gotta keep moving, but there's one more line that I really like.
All right, give us one more. Play
Does
us out,
anyone
Tariq.
here not have amnesia? I don't know.
I do love the amnesia stuff where it's just like I'm going to suffer a case of explosive amnesia. It's so good. All right, let's speaking of amnesia, a lot of people want to forget about the upcoming episode because it's so sad. There's my segue. 407 Jurassic Bark. This is almost certainly the most talked about episode of Futurama. Many people consider it to be the best episode of Futurama. I myself, when I was younger, this was my favorite episode of Futurama, mostly because it was just so emotional at the end.
Right.
But this is the episode where Fry finds his dog fossilized and spends the episode trying to refossilize, like resurrect him, what is it called? Defossilization or something like that.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
He's made out of dolomite, which is really funny.
Yeah. He's made out of dolomite, which Bender is also apparently 40% dolomite.
Allegedly, yes.
Yeah, allegedly. So this episode is our second flashback episode. We do over the course of the series. There's about 4 flashback episodes that like really focus on Fry's relationship with his family and his past. The first one being Luck of the Fryrish, one of the best episodes of all time. Second one being Jurassic Bark, talking about his relationship with his dog. Apparently, originally, their initial idea was he was going to find his mother fast.
I remember this. I remember hearing this, which is nuts. They couldn't have done that.
Would have been no, and they rightfully were like, we can't. This is too much. Like, we can't figure this out.
And the way Bender's act, you can't fucking do that. You can't do that.
Exactly. But this is, again, another episode, something we talked about in every episode of this podcast. Bender is so insecure.
Yes.
He is the moment Fry is putting his attention on his long lost dog and being excited about it, Bender is just completely depressed that Fry's not paying attention to him. And that's the whole crux of the conflict in this episode. It's Bender's insecurity about his friend getting a new friend, basically.
Right. Yeah.
It's so interesting how often that is the conflict with Bender.
Yeah.
Something pretty much exactly like that. How do you feel about Jurassic Park overall? I mean, this is a beloved episode. How do you feel about it?
I love it. I do love it. And it's a classic 1000%.
Yeah.
We're both kind of on the same page where like, it's not, fuck, this is rough. Okay. This is kind of hard to say. Okay. So I'll do it like this. Jurassic Bark is kind of like, even though I think it handles itself a little better, it's kind of like Wally and Up, where people remember a very specific section, and that section just carries the entire piece. And I'm saying that it's a little different because Jurassic Park does kind of have a tonal shift. While Jurassic Park kind of does have that tonal shift, it isn't as drastic as something like a Wall-E.
Right.
And I'm not saying that these films don't work. Like Up, Wall-E,
Yep.
I think are wonderful, amazing films. I'll go to bat for either one of those any day of the week. But I think the point is that like I feel like people don't they just remember, oh, the dog, but the dog waited the whole time, which is really, really powerful and really, really sad, and is brilliantly put together. It's so well staged and storyboarded. Like, but yeah, there are 1000% better Futurama episodes, and I think that's kind of a hard pill for people to swallow because they're so attached to this one. But there really are episodes. I went into this one thinking like, this is the untouchable classic. Like I know this is probably going to stay at the top of my list the entire time. And while I kept going, I was like, oh wait, this one's actually better, and this one's better.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, and it kind of kept going like that.
We're on the same page.
Yeah.
I do, and I don't want to say that the episode isn't great through and through, because the rest of the episode is very good.
Right.
It's like, you know, it's still a really good episode. Here's, I think, kind of my take on, you know, I will fully admit that every single time I watch this episode, the ending makes me cry. Every single time. It is impossible for me to escape it, no matter how cynical I'm being that day, no matter how much I'm like, oh, but is this episode really that good? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's a good episode, but every time that ending makes me cry. But I think the if I can critique that ending a little bit, my issue is that the ending feels a little disconnected from the rest of the episode. Obviously people remember that the most, but here's the thing is, like, when you look at an episode that's comparable to it, like I would say The Luck of the Friarish, and you get that final flashback, and that is revealing to us the truth of what happened with his brother and his nephew, and that he named his nephew after Fry, and that is intrinsically tied to the issue in that episode, which is Fry is worried that his brother just stole his identity and didn't really care about him. He only cared about, like, you know, he stealing his identity and doing all of the things that he wanted to do. He was worried that it was about his relationship with his brother, and the reveal adds to that conflict, and it addresses that conflict in a way that is a resolution. The thing about this episode is that very little of the story between Fry and Bender that's ongoing in that episode really has much to do with what they showcase at the end. Like, we get all these really good flashbacks of Seymour trying to find Fry and everything.
Right.
And to a degree, it's a little bit manipulative because they basically pull the rug out from under you, like, and reveal, you know, it's like, it's the toughest pill to swallow in all of Futurama, because not only was there no resolution to Seymour waiting for Fry, but they don't even know. Fry doesn't even know. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
Fry doesn't even realize.
I think that's
that.
why people hold on to that so much, because
yes,
they think that's really powerful. The fact that he was, number one, the fact that he was able to walk away, and number two, that all of this stuff happened, and the show just knew to not tell him, and they knew that would be more powerful.
Right.
And I think that
it's definitely more powerful. The only thing I can maybe criticize a little bit is it feels like it's like the last minute, because the resolution to the story is that Fry realizes, oh, he's 15 years old. He lived a full life. You know what I mean? And it's kind of a thing that comes up the last second. He's like, never mind, call it off. He forgot me a long time ago, like, really emotional. But that it feels that through the end feels a little disconnected to me from the rest of the story. Um, not that that's like, not that I'm not trying to criticize the episode too intensely because it works really well.
Mm-hmm.
I just think when you look at it compared to some of these other greats, they're all a little more cohesive. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that ending is a gut punch, and it's great, and it's a great moment. But I struggle to see how the idea of Seymour waiting for his whole life for Fry, only for Fry to
Mm-hmm.
never come back, ties to the themes of what's going on in the rest of the episode. You know what I mean?
I get you. I think it. I 1000% understand what you mean, but I don't know if I agree because, and I'm trying to figure out how exactly to word it, but I think it comes from like the both of it. The episode kind of establishes it's the episode telling us that the both of them really care about each other and never stop thinking about one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the stuff where Fry says like he forgot me a long time ago, yeah, it's kind of amplified by the sequence that follows after it, but it's also you're also kind of screaming at him like, wait, no, he didn't,
Right.
because you see Seymour like going the extra mile trying to find Fry when his family's not even doing it.
Yeah.
And there's such a wild screw the audience joke when they pull up to the
The cryogenic lab.
yeah, and like Seymour is literally barking right in front of Fry. Yeah, and they just don't look. They don't pay attention. And I don't know. I think I don't know if man, because I do get you though. I do get you. I do get how you feel like those things don't connect narratively.
Right.
But I think it's one of those things where I feel like this episode isn't necessarily one that says something, and more one that is more about emotion
Mm-hmm.
and what your emotions would want out of a story like this.
Right.
And just like how these characters feel, like how Fry feels and how Seymour feels. It's just kind of like a character piece about both of them and their relationship and how much they care about each other. So I don't know. I definitely get you, but I don't know if I would like kind of call them segmented. I think it is kind of this weird married character piece thing. That frame of thinking, full disclosure, that frame of thinking might come from watching so many Peanuts stuff recently, because that's kind of how they operate. Like there's a special, I think, You're in Love, Charlie Brown, that's kind of about nothing, but it's a character piece where Charlie Brown is just really nervous to talk to the little red-haired girl, and the way it ends is that she hands him a note and says, I can't wait to see you after the summer when we get back to school. But he doesn't, you think about the context of that special, he doesn't earn that. He doesn't try to go speak to her. Like, they don't have any interactions or anything like that. You don't even see her. So you have no implication that she's interested in him. And the special kind of just gives you that, because that's kind of what you would want emotionally. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's kind of how this episode functions.
Yeah.
I think it might kind of be that way. I think that's why I'm so open to the way that they did it like that.
Yeah, I guess I feel like I came off more harshly on the episode than I meant to.
No,
but like,
I promise it wasn't harsh. You were really fair. I promise. If they get mad, they get mad, man.
And I don't even want to say I fault the episode for that, because I think what they did works. I guess
Right.
I would just say that my favorite episodes of Futurama tend to have those emotional beats that and have them tie a little more narratively and thematically to what we've been seeing.
I get that.
And and I'm open to like, maybe I am missing something about this episode. Maybe I've watched it too many times over my life where I've been like, it's perfect. Wait, maybe it's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I fucking love the episode. It's a great
Yes,
episode.
it is. It
For
is great. It is a
years.
great episode. It's great,
Yeah.
fantastic television. Like it's really, really good, and it's super funny still. And it's not even like Leela's Homeworld where the episode isn't really particularly funny. This episode is hilarious. Like what do we want? Fries dog. What do we want it? Fries dog. Like it's really funny. Like it still is a really.
I love that.
It's a funny episode.
When he does the hustle to
try that transition's rad when he's just doing this and it like dissolves.
Yeah. The look on his face, he's so
determined. Yeah, it's really good,
focused and determined. Exactly. Good episode though. Good episode. One of the greats for years. My literal favorite episode of Futurama.
Likewise. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to 408. Crimes of the Hot. Climate. This is the episode where climate change finally catches up with Earth. This is the most overt environmentalist episode of Futurama, I would say. So much so that they have a little segment in this episode that explains global warming, and it was used in An Inconvenient Truth, the documentary by Al Gore about global warming.
Yeah, they played that for us in my high school environmental science class. Yeah, that particular part of the not the Al Gore film. This part of the
just
episode.
That part. Yeah. There's a lot I like about this episode. It's not one of my favorites of the season. I do think that Al Gore continues to give good performances in this show.
He's really funny. Al Gore is really, really funny, and is because. A lot of Al Gore's best stuff in Futurama is later on, but like this is still really fun.
Did you know that his daughter is a writer on the show?
I did not know that.
His daughter wrote Leela's Homeworld, Kristen Gore.
Wow.
Yeah. Bringing it all back.
Great episode of TV.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about it. My favorite thing Al Gore says is the moment he comes up. I love the fact that he is apparently the first emperor of the moon. That's good Futurama lore.
Yeah, that's really good.
And I love that the first thing he says when he rises up is, "I have ridden the mighty moonworm." I just like picturing Al Gore's head riding a moonworm. God, he's funny in this. He's funny in this episode.
He's really funny. He is.
It's another one that is very much about Bender being insecure about something about himself, which is that it's very focused on Bender like relating to the turtle because the turtle can't get up off his back, which is a very stupid joke that they establish in this episode, that Bender can't get up off his back.
Right. Yeah. I was just slightly on my side. Yeah.
Yeah. They address it in a really funny way. That's really funny. One thing I wrote down is that I know the episode needed a conflict, which is that the robots need to be destroyed in order to fix global warming. But couldn't they have just moved the robots to another planet?
Absolutely.
It seems like,
and it seems like something that they would do in this universe. Yes.
Right. Exactly. There are a lot of planets in our solar system, and robots can survive on them. So maybe instead of murdering all the robots, you consider taking them to another planet
and put them over here.
I do love the visual at the end of like, I like the visual at the end when Bender and the turtle are on their back and they both can't get up and the turtle starts to wobble. I don't know. That moment works for me.
And then, it does work thematically. I do think it's like a nice little, it's really silly and funny, but it is kind of a nice little callbacky thing that they do. Yeah. It's like, oh, you got to get up. You know what I mean? Yeah, like I appreciate that.
It's a fun episode, a middle of the road episode for me. And I honestly don't have all that much more to say about it. I appreciate that they're doing stories that are like drawing attention to climate change, especially back in 2004 when it was like not, if you compare this to something like South Park, which, a show I still love, but South Park's Man Bear Pig episode was just a climate change denial episode, even though it's hilarious.
It is.
And
It's funny, but yeah.
it's really funny, but to the point where they now just a couple of years ago made a follow-up episode to basically say, we're really sorry that we made this climate change denial episode. It's actually real. we should probably
Do
take it
something
seriously
about
now.
that.
Yeah. But so I really appreciate the Futurama staff for being willing to do that almost every season back then when it wasn't being
Right,
focused
yeah.
on as much. But other than that, I don't have that much to say about this episode. I appreciate it, and I mostly like it.
Yeah, I like this one too. It is on my lower end.
Yeah.
End. But I do like this one. I do think this one's fine. I saw that this opens season 5, which I think is a better season opener than the one that starts this season.
Kif gets knocked up a notch. Yeah, agreed.
I think this is they did a lot of really weird choices in the broadcast order, but that one is kind of inspired. That this one kind of starts this season. I do think that's pretty good.
Agreed. I hate how out of order they get, but I do think in general, like when they were choosing their season openers and season finales, sometimes stronger than the production order. And sometimes the production order isn't necessarily thinking about what's a good opener. They're mostly just thinking about like what ideas do we have and what order can we get them produced in. Absolutely. And so to a degree, even though we've been shitting on Fox for this order the whole podcast, to a degree, you got to give them credit for the things that they did do right, which is a couple. We'll say a couple things.
A few things. I could probably count them on both hands.
Yeah.
I did want to point out that this episode made me realize something. This episode is more important to me than I thought it was. And not just because they played the thing in my environmental science class. That's actually something that I tell people all the time when I think back to this episode and when it's brought up in conversation. But actually sitting down and watching it made me realize something that I 1,000,000% did subconsciously, because I didn't use this as reference, but I definitely did this subconsciously, and watching it, it's kind of scary. So in high school, me and my friend Elijah, we did a cartoon. We did an animated show called Power K. We did like 5 of those, I think. And the final episode we did before we graduated high school was an episode where one of the characters is like a kleptomaniac. Kiki, she's like a kleptomaniac, which is fucked up because we didn't know what the word kleptomaniac was until after we finished the episode. So we like we this is why you can't make stuff as kids. But we so we were calling it when you steal something from someone, we were calling it juxing, because that's kind of what they call it out here. And we did kind of a weird thing where they do an educational film about juxing, and it is damn near shot for shot that film, and I didn't even know. It's so exact that the little girl in the film is still named Little Susie, and I didn't even do that on purpose. Like, I swear I didn't use that as reference, and it was so bizarre to watch. The guy has a similar design, like it's really, really bizarre, and I homaged this entire scene without realizing that I did.
So funny. I love that. That's amazing. It is funny how like our favorite things influence us to the point where they some of these things become so ingrained in us that we don't even realize we're being influenced by them.
Right, yeah.
There's some things, I'm sure I've said jokes before that I've like not realized, that was actually from a show that I like didn't remember. It's just in my brain. Yeah.
I do that a lot. Also the prototype Bender is Bender's original design. I'm almost positive that is.
Oh, I gotta look into that. I didn't realize
the swoop ear thing, because I remember there's like a I've seen like production sketches, and I remember Bender having ears and like looking similar to what is portrayed in that scene where Professor's building them. But this one is fun. It does have I don't want to keep doing this. But it does have gay Noah's Ark.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a funny gag though. That's a
It's
funny gag though. Like I didn't even see that gag as homophobic, because they're not like, I don't
right.
think they're like looking down on it. It's
They're
mostly,
not.
it's a
No.
really funny,
It's just
it's a really
stupid.
funny character moment. I love the moment where, I love the line afterwards where he goes, it's like, you filled the ark with same-sex animals. He goes, there are parts of the
It's parts
Bible
of
I
the
like
Bible
and parts I don't
that
like.
I don't like. Yeah.
It's so funny, very
Uh,
stupid. All right, we got to move on. We're
we
only
do.
about
Yeah, let's
halfway through
go.
here. We got to keep going. And we're getting to an episode that I know you're a big fan of. So why don't
I love this
you? Yeah, let's talk about Teenage Mutant Leela's Hurdles, the episode where the entire crew gets de-aged at a health spa. Tell us about why you love this episode.
I loved this one as a kid. I always love. And that's one of my favorite kind of tropes in animated stuff where they play with ages in general.
Yeah.
Like I really, Lisa's wedding and stuff like that, I really appreciate. But the fact that like they do like the Fountain of Youth stuff, I think is really, really cool. And they start descending in ages. Like I really like that. And I really do appreciate the stuff with Leela and her parents.
Yeah.
I really do like that. I really do like that she has the opportunity to have a childhood with her parents and grow up. And I do think that's the thing though, is that it is comedic. It is comedic Leela forcing her parents to be hard on her, like, no, ground me, please. Like like all of this stuff. And when you kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, it is kind of heartbreaking, because yeah, she grew up maybe seeing that stuff on TV or something like that, and realizing that she never had that, and thinking that that's all childhood is, growing up with parents, when really there's way more to it. But she has this really vague understanding of what it is, because of where she came from. And I don't know. I still think it's really funny. Like I was, we talked about the first half of the season and it being kind of, I don't want, rough is a bad word, but it is kind of like, it isn't as funny, or some episodes like, oh, I like this a lot as a kid, but no, this is one that I think that I like just as much as I did as a kid. And it's still really, really funny. All the stuff with, I wrote, how many exclamation points is that? I wrote ultra porn with 8 exclamation points.
Ultra porn. I love that joke. I want to know what ultra porn is.
And no beard till you finish your tequila. With my last breath, I curse Zoidberg. I love all of that stuff.
I love everything at the beginning with like the gargoyle thing is so weird, but
Pazuzu.
I love Pazuzu. But I love the opening where the professor is flying the ship and he's got the high beams on. I wrote down that he destroys that space station, but it's actually Deep Space Nine from Star Trek. Like they just stole that design from Star Trek and put it in the show. So the professor destroys Deep Space Nine. That's canon.
It's pretty good.
It's I also like some of the stuff with the playing with the ages is fun. Like even though he doesn't talk in the episode, I love the moment when Hermes says goodbye, Mr. Dumsworth, and then he and Dwight are sitting there laughing together, like him and his son. And they're the same
really
age.
Good.
It's so sweet. I love that. It's so cute.
I love it. I love Fry's voice cracks too. I love that.
Billy West is talented as hell. He can just make his voice crack when he wants. It's so good. This is like one of the few instances. This is one of the instances. Sometimes I think we talked about it feels like an episode is more fantasy than sci-fi. And like we talk about the honking, like where it's like, oh, this is weird. This feels supernatural fantasy. It doesn't feel science fiction. This is an episode where I feel like they really blended sci-fi and fantasy like effectively. You've got this reverse aging thing, and you've got them going to find this fountain of aging instead, to reverse it. And that's like a completely fantastical thing. Obviously nothing rooted in science there, but it works. It like works really well for the show. It fits the story. It's really good. I really like this episode. The other line I wrote down is Teddy Bear Junction, the worst scum hole in the galaxy. It's good.
I like Oh, this is actually, I wrote this down because it reminded me of something that you were telling me about how they were like, oh, fuck time travel, and they did it a bunch of times. Professor gets
Yeah.
really, really pissed when Leela implicates that they time traveled. That she's like, when I got
Yeah.
hurled time, he's like, no, you didn't. Go live your life. Like, he's so pissed off.
That's
It
not
felt
what
like the
happened.
writers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny.
And last thing, the race when they're in the
Oh, I was
sewer
gonna talk about the race.
it's the best animated sequence in the season so far to me. I feel like I remember when we did season 2 and I was really amazed by the jump and the quality and how the characters look, and season 2 is just gorgeous the entire time. And I don't think at least in these 4, because we haven't watched the rest of them, but I don't think the show ever looks as good as season 2. Like,
Really? You don't think?
season 2 has a lot of
Interesting.
really phenomenal acting bits and a lot of great facial expressions and stuff like that, and a lot of great angles, and it gets really cinematic in a lot of parts. But I don't think, at least up until this point, until this episode, this is the closest thing I've seen to where I was like, oh my, like I was really legitimately impressed. Like I was like, this is gorgeous, this is fun, it's really well shot and everything like that. But yeah, I think season 2 is just, it's full of stuff like that.
That's so interesting.
And this is definitely the closest that it's been.
Right. There's some really good, it's pretty cool 3D models in that sewer race too. They
Yeah.
clearly built a full 3D model with characters on board for each of those
Mhm.
boats that were in the sewer race. There's only one moment where it looks weird to me, which is when they finish the race and they ride in on the wave, and you can tell that the opponent's ship is 3D and it does a
Yes.
spin, and you can see the characters are just very stiff in the spin. They're not
Yes.
like
Yeah, that's
reacting at all. And that's the
I
only
caught that
time.
too.
Yeah. And then they cut away, and then they cut back, and it's a 2D ship landing. It's like it's pretty effective though. Like
Mhm.
it's fun to look at how they do these 3D 2D transitions and see how effective they are. And even though I feel like that was time where I really noticed it, it is a good 3D model. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to 410, The Why of Fry. This is the
Yep.
Brain Spawn sequel, where Nibbler recruits Fry to stop the Brain Spawn for the second time. And it is written by series showrunner David X. Cohen, who he very rarely is the person writing the scripts in the show. He's normally just running it. Directed by the great Wes Archer. This ultimately ended up being the big finale of the Fry and the Brain Spawn saga, even though there was sort of an implication that it would continue at the end of the episode, which is interesting to me because basically Fry says, let me know if you ever need my help again to save the universe. And Nibbler's like, we will. I don't think Nibbler ever recruits Fry again to save the universe.
No, yeah, it's kind of just everybody.
Yeah.
At a certain point.
But really good episode because they not only do they tie in this, there's a lot going on. They have this ongoing story with Fry's Delta Brainwave. This is the one where they finally explain that the Delta Brainwave missing is because of the events of Roswell That Ends Well, which was not initially their plan, but they decided to to make that the case. And then they wrap up the Brainspawn saga. They tie in Fry's like sort of pining for the past and being, wondering whether or not he should belong in the future, and they tie in his relationship with Leela. So it's like kind of there's like three major aspects going on of ongoing things in the show, and they're all tied together in this one episode.
Right.
And I think it's really good. I think this is a really good episode. I think the stuff with Fry or with Leela and her date, the mayor's aide, is really funny.
I do too.
played by Bob Odenkirk, incredible actor who's now one of the biggest actors in the world, even though he was just kind of a comedy legend before, and brother of writer Bill Odenkirk on this show. But the stuff with the Niblonians and that lore always did it for me as a kid, and I still really like it. I feel like these are episodes I rewatched too much as a kid though, so like it doesn't quite have the effect on me as it used to, but I really like I really like that they had this ongoing underlying story that they followed up a few times, which is not a common thing you would see in network animated shows at the time.
Right, absolutely. I don't know.
What do you think? What do you think about this one?
I kind of so I can't seem to understand why, but this was one that like I don't. It was one of the ones I was looking forward to least to rewatching, and I don't know
Interesting.
why.
Yeah.
But when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, this episode is really, 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 really good," and it's really. Like you said that like they tie in a lot of stuff about Fry and his character. Like this is if I was saying Jurassic Bark was a character piece, this is 1,000,000% a character piece of Fry.
For sure.
And I think it's handled so well. And the reveal that Nibbler is the one that that is responsible for him going to the future, it creates a there's this dialogue that I didn't even realize that like I really appreciated. It's what is one life weighed against the whole universe? And Fry just cries and says, "But it was my life."
Right.
And it's I didn't even that's really that's tough. That's really that's a painful thing to deal with. Like saying goodbye to everything that you knew. And yeah, Fry ended up enjoying the future, but the fact that it didn't have to happen, he just thought it was kind of something that happened. But learning that there was a chance that like all of this couldn't have happened and he was forced into this, that's difficult. That changes things.
Yeah.
That makes you see everything that's happened to you completely differently. And I think it's handled really, really well. And I love all this stuff at the end. The episode is way sweeter than I remember. The stuff at the end.
Love the end.
Like
so good.
She cuts Buddy out of the picture and then Fry just walks into frame. It's brilliant. It's so inspired. Like I was like, oh my god, it's so good. Yeah, I fucking love this episode.
It's really
I also
good.
I wrote Scooty Puff Senior with 3 money bag emojis. I think that's
just
really
remember
good.
Scooty Puff Junior
sucks. Yeah.
I agree entirely. It's such a strong episode, and then also just like that scene that you mentioned is so great, where he gets the chance to go back and maybe change his past, and he's upset, even though I would argue that Fry certainly fits in the future better than he did in the past, and the show has argued that in the
absolutely.
past. It's just the fact that it's learning that even though the world is out of your, even though life is generally out of your control, it's learning that situation was literally in the control of someone else, and it was being a victim of circumstance versus being a victim of somebody's choice that they made. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that definitely shifts something in your brain when you're like, wait, this didn't need to happen. I didn't this wasn't just a random thing that happened to me. This is something that someone did to me. That's violating. It's violating to learn that kind of thing. Like that your whole existence has been shaped by this one choice someone else made for you.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately the best thing about it that they did was that they gave him the chance to go back, and he ultimately decided for himself. Like he could have undone it. And he ultimately decided for himself, no, I do belong in the future. I do want to talk to you about this one thing. I made a whole video about this, and I got a lot of interesting comments about it. So Nibbler in this scene, when Fry is talking about what he's got in the future to look forward to, and he goes and he brings up Leela, and Nibbler says, she must be the other. Do you think that was just Nibbler bullshitting Fry to get him to go back to the future, or do you think that was something they were going to set up?
It's weird because you hear about how they had all of this stuff planned, right? Like in I didn't even bring it up. I could have sworn I wrote it down, but like there's an earlier episode I think that in this season that shows Fry in the past, and like Nibbler's even in the garbage can. Like, you know what I mean? Like they had this plan, and you know that they had a plan. And when the show kind of left and came back, it just kind of seemed like either they threw it out or they were lying and they didn't have a plan all along. I don't know. I don't know.
Or they decided that was the end, you know? Because like that's the thing is like I made a video called Futurama's like unsolved mystery or whatever, the other. It was about this other moment. And I was trying to speculate if it is something that has been resolved in the show and that they just weren't explicit about it, or if it is something that they set up and just fell by the wayside. Because because this also kind of goes alongside the whole thing, the Neblonians saying, "We will need your help again. We will," and they never really asked for Fry's help again. So I made that video. I did a lot of speculation, and I feel like you could make an argument that maybe the fourth Futurama movie or the events of the Ultimate series finale, maybe those were things that could have been referenced by this, because those are both events that had universal implications, that Fry and Leela were the two people at the center of it.
Right.
But there was no Neblonians involved in either of those scenarios. And it's not stated in any way that these are related. So
when he said she must be the other, I remember a couple of days ago when watching this, I remember taking that as they must have known that. I took them saying other as Fry is not going to want to go to the future, but he will stay because of something.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, and that at least that's how I heard it when Nibbler said she must be the other. It was like, oh, so that's what the something is that like is worth it for you. You know what I mean? Like, and I guess that's kind of how I took it when I
It's almost at this point you have to take it that way, because there's not much follow up. It's like I remember seeing it when I was a kid and being like, oh, that's a lingering thread that they never answered. You know, that's a lingering thing that never got solved. I also could see, you know, I'm about to talk about this in a video. There was an unused storyline that they almost did about Fry and Leela's son traveling back from the future. Like, is it possible that they had plans for Leela and Fry's child to be an important thing, which therefore Fry and Leela, like Leela being the other, means like, oh, Fry and Leela's child is somehow important in the future or whatever. You know, it's a funny question. I don't really, you know, I'm not looking for like a definitive answer, but I did make that whole video speculating, and I got so many comments that were like, "You fucking idiot! Nibbler was just lying to Fry."
Oh, geez, like, really?
Yeah, I got so many people who were just like, you just wasted 10 minutes of my time. Fry was clearly just being lied to so that he would go back to the future. But that doesn't feel like it fits with the idea of the episode of like Fry being coerced back to the future doesn't make sense as much as as him choosing to go back to the future. And
Futurama is a funny show. It is a funny show, but they know when to take stuff like that seriously, and they were really trying to do something thematically, and I don't know if they would have did that. That sounds like something they would have done on like Family Guy or something. Like, I don't think they would have did that.
Family Guy counter.
Yeah, put it over here, over there. Put it
I think
every corner. I want it everywhere. But yeah, I don't think they would have did that. I really don't. I really don't think they would have gone about it that way. That's interesting that people see it like that, but that's the last thing on my brain. I would have never thought Nibbler was lying.
Right. That's how I felt about it. Oh, well, you know, ultimately never really got solved. So I did pitch that if they ever came back and did a real movie, that should be about that. But I want a theatrical movie if they come back and do a movie. I do too. Right? That's the perfect show for a theatrical movie.
It is, because it's probably the biggest. Like, when I say biggest, I mean in terms of scope. It's probably the biggest adult animated show, especially from that era. I mean, you could probably maybe argue Rick and Morty, but other than that, like, it's that show is gigantic. Like, there's so much scope, and it lends itself to the big screen. So I agree.
I would love just one last adventure. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to where no fan has gone before. This is where the crew gets stranded and held hostage on a planet with the cast of the original Star Trek. I I love this episode because what's really smart about this episode is that it is a fun Futurama sci-fi premise that can simultaneously make fun of superfan culture while allowing the writers of this show to be super fans of Star Trek within the show. You know what I mean? Like, so much of this episode is the writers Star Trekking out, because the writers of the show are obsessed with Star Trek.
Come true. This is
exactly
1,000,000%. They got everybody. They're all there, and they just wrote a bunch of Star Trek jokes, which, as an audience member that hasn't seen a single lick of anything of Star Trek, I can 1,000% confirm that this episode is relentlessly hilarious. This is one of the ones that I watched before we did this. I saw this not too long ago. It was kind of just on TV, and I was like, okay, I'll remember this. And I watched, and it's so funny. It's really funny. It's really good, and I haven't seen anything.
It's so interesting how many of these like animation juggernauts were inspired by Star Trek, because like I'm gonna rack up the Family Guy counter, but clearly Seth MacFarlane fucking loves Star Trek. He because didn't he have the entire cast on, was it at Family Guy or American Dad, one of those two shows? He had the entire cast of the Next Generation.
Yeah, that episode's really funny because Stewie just gets really annoyed with all of them.
I gotta watch that one because I fucking love Star Trek: The Next Generation, but also the fact that Seth MacFarlane's dream project that he's been working on for the last few years is just a Star Trek Next Generation homage. It's not even. It was basically marketed as a parody, a comedic parody, but it's really just his version of Star Trek. It's really, like, as a fan of Star Trek, watching the Orville, I was like, this is pretty good Star Trek. Like, it wasn't even like, this is funny Star Trek. It was like, this feels like Star Trek: The Next Generation, which I like. So I like this. It's interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting. I guess there's a little disconnect there. Seth MacFarlane's probably a bit younger than a lot of these these Futurama writers. So these Futurama writers are original series fans, whereas Seth MacFarlane is a Next Generation fan. But
it makes a lot of sense. Even there's some Family Guy jokes about the original stuff too.
Probably Shatner stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a. Okay, I promise I'll stop. But there's an episode.
This is you're getting cut off after this. No more Family Guy references after this.
I promise. I need help. There's an episode really early on where like Peter and Shatner like get into like an accident. I think I haven't seen it in a really long time, but I think that's how the episode goes. It's like they get into an accident, and I think Shatner like stays with the Griffins or something like that. And it's just like a really over the top Shatner where he's just kind of moving like a UPA cartoon. He's doing a lot of this shit, which I don't understand because I don't know if that's kind of how he moving. I don't know anything. I just know that it's funny Family Guy funniest moments. But yeah, this episode is just really good. Without even the episode opens with, the little tagline is just the episode title. That's the only time they've ever done that.
Yeah, they've done it a couple times. Rebirth has it. Okay. Yeah. And I think Reincarnation, which will come up in the revival seasons, but it's very rare that the episode title is what they put on under there.
Right.
Yeah, I love this episode. It's as a Star Trek fan also, it's really funny. Like, it's got really funny Star Trek humor that the first time I watched this movie, I'm very unfamiliar with Star Trek. And I since have watched a lot of Star Trek, and revisiting it after watching more Star Trek, it's like, oh, this is good Star Trek humor. Like, even just something as simple as Fry saying, you know what 6 movies average out to be really good? The Star Trek movies, which is exactly right. Like, those first 6 movies, like half of them great, the other half not so great. So although I maybe argue 4 of 6 are pretty good, but that's a different podcast. this is also though, like Star Trek being forbidden words, that was created for this episode, not canon before this. They've said Star Trek before in the show. Like they definitely introduced that for this one. But you know, it's a thing you don't care about that much because it's funny. It's a funny idea.
Yeah.
Also the whole framing device of the episode where they're in this courtroom, like on the ship, and the characters come in these like this wheelchairs with the beeping thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is based, you know, I mean, for any Star Trek fan listening, you're gonna be like, yeah, this is Baby Town Frolics information, Johnny. We know. But for anyone else,
sorry, excuse me.
For anyone else, this is based on an episode of the original series called The Menagerie. And so the interesting thing that happened in Star Trek is they had an original pilot with a totally different cast other than like Spock and a couple characters with a different captain. There's a totally different captain who wasn't Kirk, a guy named Captain Pike. They made this pilot. They weren't convinced it was the way the show to go. They made another pilot with different characters, but they still made that pilot canon. So that pilot is still canon in Star Trek. It just was never aired on television until years later. The Menagerie is an episode where they bring back the character, and he's gone through this horrible accident where he can't talk, and he's in this same exact wheelchair thing, and he can only talk by beeping. And so the whole episode is a courtroom sequence where they're reciting the events of some of the stuff from the pilot, the original pilot, and it's like and it's all framed in the same way as this episode. So that's like is like a direct reference to Star Trek, the whole framing device of the episode.
That is
which is
pretty good. I didn't know any of that, and that is rad. I like that a lot.
It's good stuff. I like Star Trek. I like Futurama. All right, we got to keep going. We got to roll. We're gonna roll on to a masterpiece of an episode. 412, The Sting. In this episode, Leela is stricken with like hallucinogenic type of grief when Fry is killed, saving her from space bees. Of course, this episode, I'm a sucker for episodes that mess with time and reality in like trippy ways in general. Like any show I like that does that, I'm like, hell yeah, this is what I want. I love this. This episode does it perfectly because it keeps you like the first time you watch this episode, you're just like, what is happening? It keeps you guessing the whole time, and it is such an incredibly well done reveal that is, spoiler alert, that Leela was the one in the coma from the bee attack, and that Fry was actually okay. He didn't die from the space bees. And that everything in the dream has been her coma dream, and everything happening has basically been a result of the things Fry has been saying to her at her bedside. Fuck, man, I love this episode. Tell me, how do you feel about The Sting?
Oh my god, because all right, I loved this one as a kid, but like whatever the elevation of love is where I am right now with it. This one is really, really good. First of all, it is the most cinematic episode of the entire series so far. You could take this episode as is and put it on a theater screen, and it would be gorgeous, and it would feel cinematic. It would feel like you're watching a film. It is brilliant, especially the honeycomb stuff. Like all the stuff we're in the honeycomb it's gorgeous. It's shot really well, and all of it's really, really good. And man, I don't know. I can't even, like, this episode is one of those ones that like it kind of gets you a little upset. It's like, damn, this one's so it's really, really good.
Agreed. Written by Patrick Verone, who's written a lot of classics. Really good writer. I just like, did you notice all the things that come back in the final scene? It's just a couple shots that they're in once they both wake up. Or once Leela wakes up and they're in the hospital room. And if you see, the gift that he bought her is on the nightstand. The one that in the dream is like, that I got you a gift, it's in my locker. It's on the nightstand. So, you know, he gave her the gift even in the coma, and he said all of these things to her that she heard in the dream at her bedside. She's wearing his jacket, which was another part of the episode. And then even I noticed this for the first time this time, and I've watched this episode so many times, on the television, it is like the ice fields that they go through in one of those dreams where they're on the sled ride. It's so basically it's implying that like what is on the TV. Fry was watching this on the TV, talks about going through these ice fields with Leela, and it goes into her coma dream. It's every fucking level.
That's
It's
so
so
good.
well done. It's incredible.
Wow.
I'm astounded. I'm astounded by how good this episode is.
Yeah, man.
And it's an episode I've seen dozens of times, and it just gets better. It just gets better. I love it so much. Yeah. It's almost so good that it's like, what can you even say about it? What more can you say about how good this episode is?
Yeah. I mean, like, if you want to, I think the best thing to possibly do, because you can't keep running in circles to say how good it is, but because it really is inspired. It is brilliant. I think it's top 3 best of the entire show. Like, it's that good. Like, it's so fucking good.
Yeah.
But they do a lot of really funny stuff. It is still an episode of Futurama, so it is still really funny. I especially like, there's 2 things that I really, really like. You brought up a callback, so I'll bring up another callback. When they say at the eulogy, which is the worst eulogy ever, when they say he do good snoo, and then everybody's like, and then the heater's there.
The heater, the radiator from the radiator planet. Yeah.
I couldn't believe that. Funny. I was like, okay.
Maybe the first hint that it was a dream, because why would the radiator be there? You know what I mean? It's a literal radiator.
Yeah.
There's a lot of characters. Even Gunther's sitting there at the funeral with them.
Yeah. Which is really, again, this is an episode that rewards you for watching the show the entire time, because everybody's there. Everybody really is there.
Yeah.
When this is another implication that this is a dream, because just why is this happening? There's an establishing shot of Planet Express, and then you go inside the meeting room, and Bender's just on fire. Like,
I love that so much. It's so funny.
It's really funny.
Everyone comes in and puts out. Every single person comes in with a fire extinguisher, puts him out, and he just goes, "That's better." And then he pulls out a cigar and starts smoking again.
Yeah.
No context for why he was on fire. It's just
it's really funny.
So funny. Oh God, I love it.
The last thing I have is that apparently Julia Roberts was buried alive. Apparently that's something that happened.
Oh my God. So weird. Fuck, I love this thing. It's great. We'll talk about it in the ranking. But I fucking love this thing. Fucking love this thing. It's so good. And then we got to go from the Sting to Bend-Her.
I wrote. All right, man, let's go. I wrote that.
My description of the episode is: Bender has a sex change operation to win at sports. ... Yikes. That is what I wrote for the episode description. This is we previously said on another episode that Raging Bender probably aged the worst out of any episode. I think this takes the cake. This one is the worst aged episode of Futurama ever. Easily, very easily, because it's kind of a lot of the stuff from that Raging Bender episode just taken to a different degree. It's just like real, like it's the idea of this episode is fundamentally transphobic, which is a huge bummer.
Yes,
and it's not, and it's fully played for gags, and there's nothing. And there's nothing about it there's nothing about the conversation that is nuanced in any way. It is just played for gags.
And they try to have characters like Leela and Amy tell him about himself. But number one, they're telling him about himself for all the wrong reasons. It's more like, you're not a woman. Like, it's more like that. And number two, they're like, they still, even then they say like wild transphobic shit. Who is that? Leela, when Bender's about to go on a date with Calculon, and she's like, it's like I can't approve of you dating a man by something like that. And it's like, geez, this is rough.
Yeah,
and that's what's so weird about Futurama, man. I don't know if I've been watching these episodes, and I know people think that this stuff is really smart, but I think that is really clumsy. When I don't like when they try to talk about actual things that are really sensitive, but they try to clean it up and make it about the robots. That's only worked a few times. That worked in Hell as Other Robots. I think they worked really, really well.
Right.
But even an episode that I enjoyed, what's the one where he dates Lucy Liu?
That is shoot, what's it called?
I Dated a Robot.
I Dated a Robot. Yeah, it's very, very blatant title about what it is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Even one like that I still enjoyed, it's really clumsy because it's like, okay, so is Bender supposed to, what is he just racist? Right. Like, what's going on here? Like, why is he so mad? And even then it's like you compare, like I don't know. I feel like people would try to say that, like, I guess, because number one, to a certain degree with Futurama, there's no such thing as looking too deep into it because it's fucking Futurama. Right. And there's subtext and everything that they do. And they're blatantly trying to do some kind of weird mixed race thing there. And I think it's really, really clumsy. But I guess it's cool because the episode separates itself to where you could look away from that and just be like, well, yeah, what Fry is doing is actually really, really creepy. So like you can at least do that. But here, this is, so look, I think this is even though I think they shouldn't have done this, at the core, the idea of wanting to win, so posing as a woman, is 1,000,000% something Bender would do. That is 1,000% something it makes sense for his character. But Futurama is not the show to tackle this kind of stuff. I always kind of said like Futurama is literally one of the smartest shows I've ever seen, but it's smart in other aspects.
Yeah, it's like
this kind of stuff.
It's a book smart.
You know
show.
What I mean? Exactly. Yeah. But like with this, it's like, man, this one is rough.
Yeah,
this one is really rough to sit.
Even just thinking about it when you're talking about it, like not only is the whole fundamental idea from the beginning where Bender has the sex change to win at sports has issues on a transphobic level, but even after that, the rest of the episode, Bender is just continuing to scam people through this sex change operation, which is like a real rooted fear that people have in their transphobia. Like a lot of people are transphobic and are like worried that the people that trans people have ulterior motives for transitioning, which is fucking ridiculous bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, and it's frustrating that in a way this episode is like stoking the flames of that fear, albeit in a different way, but it's totally feeding into that same idea. And that's it's a huge bummer because the show is so good and the show is so many good episodes. And, you know, there's just these handful that are just like, man, this is dated in a way that really bums me out. Like it really bums me out.
Yeah.
It's a rough one, man. And anything you did like in this episode? Anything? Like
this episode has Barbados Slim, who I haven't shut up about for the past 3 episodes. And then he shows up in the worst episode. And I didn't even realize that this is his first and only appearance in the entire original run. And I didn't know that. I did not realize that. And he's John DiMaggio? Which I didn't know that either. I didn't know that. I didn't know because, you know, spoiler alert, me and Johnny cheated on the podcast and we talked about Futurama yesterday. So I brought this up like John DiMaggio. I couldn't even believe that. But you know, I love Barbados Slim. I love the announcer when he's with Hermes and he's like, I say go to hell, Barbados Slim.
He initially wants Barbados to win. The announcer's just very biased in who they want to win the race. I do think one of the things I kind of liked about this was the future Olympic categories. Like the limbo running was kind of cool. Like that's pretty funny. It's a stupid idea, but it's funny to see them like it's hurdles, but they're limboing as they run. It's a silly idea. Also, I never believed for a second that Hermes could catch up to Barbados Slim. That was, I know he caught up, but like, nah, he wouldn't have caught up. All right, man, not a big fan. Maybe we should move on. I think we got some
let's get out of here.
good discussion here. Let's get the fuck out of here. All right, 414, Obsoletely Fabulous. Bender gets stranded on an island with obsolete robots and downgrades to a wooden body. And the first thing I wrote down is that it's weird that this is 2 episodes in a row where Bender changes his model in some way. Changes his body.
Literally wrote 2 Bender insecurity stories in a row.
Really weird.
That's my first note. Yeah.
This is one that I've always kind of forgotten about. It always feels like yeah. There are good jokes in it. I laughed really hard at the announcer talking when they're revealing the new robot, and the announcer is introducing Mom, and he's like, and very playfully is like, the person who monopolizes the robot industry. Like they're like playfully talking about how she's got a monopoly on it, which is that's funny to me. I really liked, and I did like I liked the robots on the island. I liked seeing the old robots. Cartridge Bot made me laugh. The robot who has the water wheel made me laugh, who like constantly needs to refill the water wheel. But overall, it's like, this is a pretty out there, weird episode. I guess I was about to say this feels like a Treehouse of Horrors, feels like a What If machine. And ultimately, in the end, it is, because it's all in his brain. Like, you know what I mean? It's all in his mind, so it's not real. So I guess it kind of has some leeway there, where it's like, normally I would be like, oh, this doesn't feel very Futurama-y, but it was all a dream, so it's fine.
Exactly. I do. One thing I did notice is that, and I feel like I might have talked about this before, but Bender, it is made clear multiple times, and it is a clear pattern that Bender really only sympathizes with something when it involves him, and then he goes overboard. It's exactly like the type of shit that happens in like Bending in the Wind. It's literally just that, but without Beck. But yeah, I don't know. It is a weird one. It is still enjoyable, but it is really forgettable. And but I do think that the ending is strangely beautiful. Like, he's just like, well, I guess life's what you make of it. And then it's just like this really beautiful shot when he's just like walking through like a meadow. It's like, what are they doing? And I don't know why it made me smile really hard, but it's like, I felt like they didn't earn that. Like, I was like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. Sometimes it still will get you, even if it's not earned. It's like, oh, that's nice. That's nice. I think my favorite joke in the whole episode is the cartoon catapult noise gag, where they're just waiting for the catapult thing to hit them, and it's just it's just they're just waiting and waiting and waiting, and it's like the longest wait. And they do it twice. They do it 2 times. It's funny. But overall, like, yeah, it's like, again, I think the thing we can most talk about with this episode is like, again, Bender. I literally wrote in all caps, Bender is so insecure. It's all about Bender's insecurities. It's just the ongoing thing in the show. We're like totally broken records about Bender being insecure, but it is the like major through line for most Bender stories in this show, is that they stem from his insecurity. And that's what this episode is fully. But I really don't have all that much more to say about it. Like, it's it's got some funny stuff, but it's lower on my list for sure.
Same.
All right, well, let's move on to a good episode. 415, the Farnsworth Parabox. This is the episode where Professor Farnsworth accidentally creates a box containing a parallel universe. Written by Bill Odenkirk, writes a lot of my faves. This is probably my favorite, like, pure science fiction episode, like pure science fiction concept episode. Like, I feel like a lot of them. A lot of my favorite episodes have good sci-fi concepts, but really hook me with an emotional aspect too. Like, that emotional stuff is really what, ultimately, when you look at my list of favorite episodes in the show, that's going to be the through line of my favorite ones. There's a good emotional hook. This one, there's some emotional stuff, but mostly this is just a funny sci-fi idea. It's fun to see these characters interact with alternate versions of themselves. It's good. I really like this one. I have a lot of fun with this one every time. How do you feel about the Farnsworth Parabox?
I think that this actually might be the funniest episode in this entire run.
Damn.
It's so funny. Like, I
Yeah.
love this one to death. I love all the. It's really, really cool to see these characters talk to each other, like talk to themselves, like
Right.
and be with themselves and interact with themselves, and all the universe hopping is really fun. There isn't a single one that misses. They're all really, really funny.
Yep.
And there's so many lines in this one that are just like, they're just so, the whole thing is just really, it just doesn't stop making you laugh. Like,
It's so
whether
good.
it's like the butter in my pocket is melting. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, there's
even
like,
just the shot when they're trying. I like when they're trying to steal. They're trying to steal the box, and there's just a shot of them both in the grate, and Bender opens the grate, and Fry just looks miserable.
Drenched. Yeah, it's really funny.
It's so funny. I think my favorite line in this episode, it makes me laugh every time I think about it, and it's when Fry and Leela are on a date with Fry and Leela, and they're talking about like, oh, how this alternate Fry and Leela are married, which again is like, it's a small part of the episode, but that is kind of a big moment in the Fry and Leela ongoing relationship thing, recognizing that alternate versions of them are happy together and married. But they're telling the whole story of how they got together, and alternate Fry goes, actually, there's a couple of really good lines. And Leela first says, my only excuse left was something about a ghost, so I flipped a coin. And then Fry goes, so that's why you said you had to go meet that ghost.
Yeah.
and then alternate Fry says, a year later, I gave her this diamond scrunchie and we were married. And Fry goes, a year later, I got beat up by a guy named Scrunchy at a Neil Diamond concert. Yeah. so fucking funny. Yeah, I agree. It's like weirdly, in a lot of one of the weird things that they do in Futurama generally is if a character meets themselves. Maybe this is more established in Bender's Big Score, but once there's more time travel happening. But generally, if a character meets themselves, they don't get along in this show. It's like when you see Fry meet himself in Bender's Big Score, he's like, okay, dork, see you later. You know, like he doesn't like himself. Like they don't get along. But in this one, all the alternate versions of themselves get along, and I think that works best for this episode. Except
Absolutely.
for maybe Amy. The Amy's have issue with their color.
But that's a good gag.
Right? Yeah, it is.
It works out because it's a really good gag. So that's cool.
And I like that Zoidberg kind of finally finding someone to talk about how poorly he's treated leads him to do something drastic finally. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, let's steal that box. He's finally got someone to commiserate with. It's such a funny episode. Really good.
I really like in the opening, Buddha, Zeus, God, one of you guys do something. Satan, you owe me.
You owe me. Dude, I like that. They like kind of slowly hint that the professor is some kind of Satanist. There's a line that I repeat a lot because it makes me laugh so hard. And this isn't from this season, so I'm just spoiling it. This is from Bender's Big Score, where he, like, I say this a lot in my everyday life, where the professor just says, Fry, how in Satan's glorious name did you return? I just like dropping that into everyday conversation and seeing how people react. Like, great episode though. I fucking love the Farnsworth Parabox. Really funny, great, funny and good sci-fi.
I think the hippie professor is. His relationship with Amy is so funny. She's like, right on.
Yeah, like, right on, Professor Freaksworth.
I love that. And I think the last thing that I have is that I have two other things. So there's the one where they have no eyes and it's like, we didn't see anything ever. And they turn around. That's so good. It's such a funny joke. And lastly, the the resolution where they just kind of grabbed the box and flew it inside out. Must have been impossible to animate. I would not have wanted to be a part of that.
I've watched that. I've watched that part. It's in slow mo to like see how they do it, and ultimately it's just a cheat. Like they just have one kind of pull into it, and then the other one, like it's impossible, obviously, because it's a physically impossible thing that's happening. It's not, but it does look great. It looks really good. Like when it's played at normal rate, it's just like that's fucking crazy.
Right.
Man, I am saying fuck a lot in this episode.
Come on in, I mean,
cartoons aren't the only thing that curse. I'm gonna tone it down a little bit though.
Cartoons aren't the only thing that cursed is really funny.
All right, great episode. Let's move on. We got 3 more episodes to talk about, and then we got to kind of do a little wrap up of this mini series, talking about the original run of Futurama. So let's talk about 416, 300 Big Boys. It's the episode where the government gives everyone on Earth a $300 refund, and I think personally that this is a super underrated episode. I have always seen this one as it's really funny, and there's no episode like this one because it has all of these intersecting stories. And it's interesting that one of the last episodes in the original run, I guess maybe the one you could argue is like this, comes in the revival season, is The Prisoner of Benda, where there's all of these different characters doing different stuff and it all intersects. But this is the only one in the original run that I can think of like this, where every single character has something. We see what every single character is doing with their refund and how those events come to intersect by the end of the episode. But I mostly just think this is a funny episode. I laugh a lot during this episode.
It's really funny. It is really funny because it's a lot of character stuff.
Exactly.
And that's what makes it really, really good. It's just Futurama 22 short films about Springfield.
Totally. Though they come together in the end, but it's basically that kind of idea. I also wrote down how much I love the whale biologist. The whale biologist thing is so funny, to give a one-off character that weird of a quirk that stands out so much in the episode. But that's really funny, where he's just a really weird whale biologist. I'm a whale biologist. I calls him like I sees him. You're lumpy and you smell awful. But yeah, I've always laughed at this episode. I've always thought it was really funny. It's, really good. It's like, and it's weird because there's this big shift in the whole all of Earth, because like everyone has gotten this refund. So even the background characters you see are like going nuts with their refunds and doing fun new things.
He goes into a fucking crack mansion. That is the sickest joke in this entire first series. I couldn't believe that. So this was, no more crack houses for me. The design is so funny. The eyes are like spaced out, and there's bags, but then there's bags under the bags.
Right.
It's such a funny design. Everything about that gag is really, really funny.
Even just the idea of a crack mansion.
Mansion.
A crack mansion.
It's the sickest concept.
Oh man. This is also a good. I'll say 2 more things before I think we should move on. But one is another good Zoidberg doing the right thing episode, because this whole episode is about Zoidberg's refund story is him trying to relate to people who have money finally, because he's never had money. And he's doing his best to understand this like rich lifestyle. He's like, now I have money. I'm like one of you. And in the end, he's kind of embarrassed and ridiculed because he definitely is not a rich person. He's just got a $300 refund. And so, but I love that in the end, what he decides to do with his refund is buy all the homeless folks a feast. And it's just another example of Zoidberg, like doing, even after being embarrassed and ridiculed, doing the best thing anyone did in the episode, which is to buy a bunch of food for a bunch of homeless folks. And I love that. Zoidberg is just a good person.
Seeing your video on it was the first time I had thought about this episode in a really long time, and that's it. I definitely remember that, and that convinced me. Like, yeah, what the fuck? He's such a good guy.
He's such a sweet boy.
Yeah.
Poor Zoidberg.
Around around that same scene, there's Hermes gives Dwight a penny. And he's like, I'm gonna invest this in Amazon.com. He's like, oh, a risk taker. It's like, apparently Amazon is a risk back then.
Yeah, that's so funny because this episode is probably written in 2003, which was probably before Amazon had fully moved past the bookstore thing. Because like initially, Amazon was just books.
That's true. Yeah,
that is a dated joke because
super dated,
if he how many shares was it? Just one, or was it a bunch of shares? 100 shares or something? Man, if Dwight invested in that many shares of Amazon.com, he'd be set for life. Yeah. That's pretty funny. I also just love like jittery caffeinated Fry.
I was gonna say the Fry stuff has a brilliant payoff. It's
such a good payoff, and even though it is something that is so unrealistic, like even on a sci-fi level, it's just a pure fantasy, like where he's like he hits that 300th cup of coffee or 100th cup of coffee, and all of a sudden he's the Flash. He sees everything in slow motion. That sequence is so great. I love how that sequence is animated. I love how he sees everything in slow-mo, and then we zoom out and we see him moving, flashing through and picking everyone up. And how the way he like gently blows out fires and saves people. It's so good.
His facial expression makes that sequence. He's just like dull, like he instantly calms down. It's so funny. And he does like the slow turnaround, like it's so good. I love it.
It's
really funny.
Great ep. All right, let's move on to a weird episode, second to last episode, 417 Spanish Fry. This is the episode where Fry's nose is stolen to be used as an alien aphrodisiac. Pretty weird.
Yeah.
Pretty weird. So I had a few things to say about this one. I'm not a huge fan of this episode, because I just think the overall premise is a little too fucking weird for me. Damn it, I'm saying fuck again. I can't get it out. I'm on this roll of curses. I think there's some stuff in this episode that is like fundamentally very funny though. Like the idea of them doing a standard alien abduction sequence in Futurama is funny to me. Right. Just like, Fry got abducted by aliens, and like the way he reacts is funny. He's like, oh, it's just a spaceship, just a flying saucer.
Yeah.
I love the Bigfoot stuff. I love the way that at the beginning Fry's excited about Bigfoot. There's the park ranger who's obsessed with Bigfoot. I love how obsessed with Bigfoot the park ranger is, and I love that it comes back in the end where Bigfoot comes in.
Real quick about Bigfoot. In Farnsworth Parabox, Leela is reading a magazine that says Bigfoot turns 80. And then they don't believe Bigfoot exists.
You're right. And you know what's so funny is I forgot about that. But the reason that I remembered that that was something I always thought about when I was watching the show as a kid on DVD, because one of the DVD menus has her reading that magazine. So it was like whenever I put on, like I was obviously it's a shot in the show, but whenever I would put on that DVD, I was like, oh yeah, Bigfoot turns 80, but then Bigfoot's not, like they don't believe Bigfoot's a thing in this episode.
Exactly.
Obviously it's just a background gag, so it's really like inconsequential, but it is funny how just 2 episodes before or 3 episodes.
Right. It was weird because I usually don't notice stuff like that. Like, and for some reason, when I saw because in Farnsworth Parabox, it's really funny because the joke is, Bigfoot didn't exist now. Like right now, Bigfoot didn't exist, but Bigfoot somehow exists 80 years, like comes into existence 80 years before the series starts. Right. Like Bigfoot is a legend right now in present day, but 1,000 years into the future is when Bigfoot actually exists. Like that's funny, and that's what made me. I was like, oh, that's what made me pick up on that. I was like, oh, that's funny. Bigfoot turns 80. Right. And then when I think of Spanish Fry, I think about all the stuff with his wiener. I don't think about all the Bigfoot stuff earlier. Right. So when it happened, I was like, wait, what the fuck? Like I instantly remembered that. Let me write it
down. I did write down that without a nose, Fry looks This is stupid. Fry looks like Gumbly, everyone's favorite Simpsons character.
He looks just like Gumby, man.
Yeah. A very real character that we'll talk about when we cover The Simpsons.
He really went off the rails after season 5, but I don't really want to. I don't want
to. I do think my favorite moment though in the episode probably comes at the end when and it's just the Bigfoot moment at the end when like Lure and Inda start going at it and Bigfoot just makes this like approving face and nods. He's like it's so weird.
That's a stupid drawing. Like there's only a few really dumb drawings in Futurama. That's a really stupid drawing.
Oh, it's so good. All right. Do you have anything else to say about Spanish Fry, or should we talk about the masterpiece that is the original series finale?
I have here that it is the most immature episode of the entire series because it absolutely is.
And it was the second to last one in the original run. It's so weird.
All those wiener jokes, they're so stupid and it's so funny. Like everybody is really really, really immature.
Maybe this was their fuck you to Fox. Maybe they were like, well, you're like, you guys are going to cancel us. Well, we're going to just talk about our wieners for the last episode of the show.
It's so funny. My favorite out of all of the wiener jokes is when he says, I think I'll have Fry's lower horn jerked. Fam, that's crazy. That is crazy.
And it's the second jerked meat joke in the show.
Oh yeah, that's right. Is there anything this any meat this man can jerk? I forgot about that one. Yeah.
That's so funny.
And last, another really good line in the episode is when Fry's like, who's with me or who will help or something like that, and Leela says, me and Bender and maybe Zoidberg if he feels like it. And
that's just a writer's joke. That's just like, who do we rope into this adventure? Maybe Zoidberg.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the original series finale. 418, The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings. This is the episode where Fry makes a deal with the robot devil to become great at the holophoner, and by a twist of fate, he switches hands with the robot devil himself. This is written by Ken Keeler, the legend who wrote every Futurama series finale, all 4 of them, which is a weird thing to say.
Right.
But this is a masterpiece. This is one of the best episodes of the entire show. I don't think there's many people who will disagree with that. It's so great because it's roping back in. It's a great Fry and Leela focus story. It's roping back in stuff that we learned from Parasites Lost, another great episode. And it's just like it's a fun twist on the deal with the devil storyline. And it gives it's just we've talked about this a lot. I know we've talked about this a lot ourselves. It's if this had been the final episode of Futurama, while I know for a fact that there was a point in my life where this was the final episode in Futurama and I was still really hoping for more, I think ultimately I would have been satisfied if this was the end of Futurama. This is such a good way to end it. It's such a great note to end the show on. How do you feel about The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings?
This episode, so do we talk about this? Do we talk about the ongoing feud that me and you have had since we've met?
I don't think we've talked about it on the podcast.
Well, me and Johnny go back and forth because it has been years, granted, so I haven't, and I'm going to save it for whenever we end up doing the later seasons, but I remember not liking Meanwhile. Like, not I didn't think it was a bad episode, but I remember not liking it as much as a finale. And I always thought that this was the better one. And seeing this again, especially after seeing every episode before it in order and experiencing this entire show for a month, this is not only my favorite episode of the whole show, But is this is one of my favorite things. Like, this episode is insanely brilliant. Like, I've never seen anything like this before, and it's really well put together. And watching the entire thing, especially that later half, like with the opera, it's you can't even. It's crazy. Like, it's untouchable. And so I tell this story all the time about the first time I saw Into the Spider-Verse. When the first time I saw Into the Spider-Verse, I cried, but I didn't cry because of the movie resonating with me emotionally. I cried because, like, it was so good that I got overwhelmed. Like, my emotions got overwhelmed and just tears poured out of my eyes. And that's the first and only time that it ever happened to me. And this was the second time. After watching the show for a month and finally seeing the final shot, I couldn't, but like, I was like, oh my God, this is really, really good. The fact that, even though I do think, because I know you're an advocate for it, I do think that you want to give it one more go is a good line. I think that's a good line. I think that's a good final line. I really, really love the fact that if this show would have ended right here, the last line of dialogue ever spoken would have been, "I want to hear how it ends."
Yeah,
I love that. I love that.
that is a really good final line. The real final line for Meanwhile, which we will talk about in the end, is he does say, "What do you say? Do you want to go around again?" And then Leela says, "I do." Those are the last two words. "I do," which I do think is also a pretty good ending, especially in the context of that episode. But also, we'll get there. We'll talk about Meanwhile in the future. My take on the series finales, these are the two best ones. Devil's Hand is Our Idle Playthings, and Meanwhile are the two best finales. And I like the Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings more overall as an episode. I think it's on my overall ranking of the whole show. It's probably my third favorite. It's like real up there. Meanwhile, I just think is a better series finale. That is my take. It's like it's because you can tell, as great as this episode is and as satisfying as it would have been if this were it, you can tell that it is a episode written in case it is the series finale. You know what I mean? And it's great and it works perfectly. It's the absolute optimal version of that, especially because there are two more versions of that within Futurama, Into the Wild Green Yonder and Overclockwise. And both of those, while having good endings, aren't as good final episodes as The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings. Not even close. I can't get into a full Meanwhile thing now because we haven't even watched it for this.
Right.
But we'll talk about Meanwhile. We'll talk about Meanwhile in the future. It's so good. I really do think after watching the whole show, you're gonna come around on it, even if you don't like it as much as this episode. But we'll see. Maybe I'm putting too much pressure on you.
No, I do. I do kind of have like a Meanwhile thesis, but I can't really say it because I haven't seen the episode in a really long time. But I will say that when Meanwhile first happened, because I still had this channel back then, nobody knew who I was. I had a 20-minute video written about why this episode is better than Meanwhile. And
if you had put that episode out, we maybe wouldn't have been doing this podcast.
Maybe not. Probably not. Because I recorded it, but the only thing that happened is that laptop broke a little after that.
Oh, no.
So it never saw the light of day. And it saved my life because I wouldn't be talking about cartoons that say very bad words that you can't say in front of your mom. But no, I just really, I can't get enough of this one. It's frustrating.
It's incredible. There's no question about it. It is one of my favorite episodes of television. It's a great wrap up. It's like, because it's the perfect culmination of everything we've seen from Fry and Leela up to this point, where it's certainly, like, hopefully, seemingly the beginning of something for Fry and Leela. That's what it feels like at the end. And it's like a hopeful, optimistic, like, hey, this is it. But, here's an idea. Like, just know things will work out for them. Like this is what Fry
Right,
wants.
yeah.
Leela's there to see how it ends. And I love that. It's also just a fun big spectacle. Having the robot devil featured prominently in the finale is great. One of the best guest stars and guest voice characters in the whole show. The holophoner. We talked about this in Paradise Lost. The concept of the holophoner is so cool. And this is another one that kind of slightly alters how it works, because you have all these performers and he's holophoning the holograms over these performers, which is really interesting. But it's cool. That's a really cool concept. It's really interesting how they do that. And then, you have the whole, obviously any deal with the devil comes with a caveat, and then the devil starts pulling the strings behind the scenes to the point where he manipulates it so that he's given Leela's hand in marriage. And you have this great moment where Fry is really given no option. He's given the option, but there's really no choice. And it's that he has to give up the thing that is making Leela fall in love with him, or the other option is just lose Leela, like guaranteed lose Leela. She's, so,
Right.
obviously Fry's going to do the right thing there, but it's just really tight. It's a really tight script. It's really well written. It's such a great way to culminate that Fry and Leela storyline, and it is such a good way to end this run of episodes.
Absolutely.
And a masterpiece, an absolute masterpiece. You have any other last thoughts on this thing?
I feel like I'm just gonna keep saying it's so good, so I should probably shut up.
Well, let's talk about real quick. I know we're running long. Sorry, this is probably going to be the case for a lot of these long seasons. We apologize. But let's talk about the original run of Futurama. Let's talk about these first 4 seasons. Going back, it's been really interesting to watch with you and talk through them, because I watched through them recently about last year, because I started making a lot of videos about Futurama, and that was the first time I revisited Futurama in quite a few years after being like really obsessed with it, like obsessed with Futurama growing up. And even rewatching it this time with you feels a little different. And I don't know if it's because I'm thinking about it from a critical perspective, where I'm like, I got to talk about this stuff with Tariq. And I'm starting to I'm thinking more clearly about the things that I'm more critical of, or I'm thinking about the things that, like, the reasons why I love these episodes versus just me being, so comfortable and nostalgic watching them.
Right.
But it is interesting. I love this original run. I don't think there's only 1 or 2 episodes that I would say these are bad.
Right, yeah.
But it is interesting how I feel like I previously would have been like, yeah, the whole original run is gold. It's gold, the whole damn thing.
Right,
and this time watching through, I'm like, it's like half incredible and it's half good. It's half pretty good.
Right.
How did you feel? It's been a first time in a while watching through the whole show, right? What were your thoughts on,
absolutely.
on this?
Number one, I think this might be my first time watching the show in order, in like the correct order. But even in all of these there hasn't been a single episode that we watched this entire time that I haven't seen before.
Right.
Because, like, I wouldn't say I was, if I was obsessed with Futurama, I would have as many Futurama DVDs as I have Simpsons, but I do have Futurama DVDs.
Right.
I did, me and my mom went to the mall when Ben's Big Score came out, and I brought that, like, I remember all of this. Like, I was definitely around, and I love Futurama to death. And it's been really interesting because Futurama has always lived in my brain as this really, really smart and funny show, and that's it. But it's been really interesting tapping in and going and seeing not only what exactly made it tick, but all the things that it had going on under the surface. Stuff that I didn't really realize, like all the stuff we talked about with Bender, or how seamlessly they bleed all of the Fry and Leela stuff together, and how late certain characters come in that are really, really memorable.
Right.
How late certain lines are, like how early some things are, like, you know what I mean? And it is, and it's just like how you say it's been interesting for you to have to look at them through a different lens after living with them for so long. It's been interesting for me to watch this show with somebody who knows so much about it, and to look at it in ways that I hadn't really seen before. Things that I didn't even realize were going on under my nose, you brought to my attention. Like, and that's what's been really cool. And that's something that I didn't when we started doing this, I just thought it'd be fun to just laugh at a bunch of cartoons.
Yeah.
But I'm realizing now that like doing this kind of recontextual, whatever show we do, I feel like it's gonna start to recontextualize certain things. Because
Yeah.
that's what it did. That's what it did for me here. It certain episodes I was forced to watch certain episodes as an adult that I know for a fact that I probably wouldn't have went back. Like a Leela of our own, Leela of our own. I wouldn't have went back to watch that, but now I connect to it on this like really insane level.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it's dope. The first 4 seasons of Futurama are insane. That it's insane. Insanely great storytelling. Even like we said, it's only like one or two like, oh, okay, this sucks. But
Yep.
it's wild to think that they had such a perfect streak. Even though I'm glad that the show came back and we got those films, and there's still some nice stuff sprinkled in there, even though there's a lot that I haven't seen, I will say that if this show would have stopped right here, this might have been, man, because Futurama still is one of the greatest cartoons ever made, but this would have been one of the most perfect. This would have been the most perfect batch of just like a group of it would have been just like a perfect run, like a perfect sprint to the finish line, and they stick the landing with what I think is the best one. You know what I mean? Like, and sure. It's wild to think about that. Man, this show is just unbelievably good. It is by very definition the sum of its parts. It's really good, and it's been dope revisiting it.
Yeah, I'm so glad we did it. I'm so glad we did this one first, even though I've kind of been enveloped in Futurama for the last year or so since I started talking about it more on my channel. But it really is like I'm forever grateful the show came back, especially because I think I love Bender's Big Score so much. I know we won't talk about that for a while, but it's so good. And there really are, like, even though I would say there are probably more episodes I don't care for than ones I do in the revivals, like the episodes I do like in the revivals are so strong that I'm like, oh man, if I were like, I don't think I could choose the option where I'm like, do I live in a reality where those never existed? You know what I mean? Like I could, if I was given that Fry choice, like, hey, you can go back to the Nexus point where Futurama doesn't come back from the dead. I don't think I could do that. Even though I think, even though looking at this original run, I'm like, yeah, but it never, it was never going to reach that consistency again after the, even in the movies, even in the DVD movie season, it doesn't quite reach the consistency of how great these original 4 production seasons were. And but in the end, it's still such a strong run. They pretty much doubled their episodes with the DVD movies and revival seasons. They pretty much had about 70-ish here and about 70 more after, if you divide those movies up into 4 episodes each, like they did. So you kind of got a half and half situation. But man, it's been so fun watching through them with you and talking about them, especially because you brought up a Leela of your own. That's an episode that I still isn't one of my favorite episodes, but the way you recontextualized it and why you relate to it personally was like, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. I was just like, I've seen this episode so many times. I never thought I could see it differently. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the way you kind of brought it around, like you got to make that video. You got to make a video about Leela.
I will. I'm gonna get on that.
Yeah. Great show. All right. We've been rambling for a while. This is a long episode. Let's do our rankings. Let's wrap this up. I'll go first. I'll start from the bottom to the top. I have a feeling that our rankings are going to be closer this season than any other season. That's just my inkling. I think so. Though I don't think they'll be exact. They'll be close though. 18, Bend Her. 17, Obsoletely Fabulous. 16, Kif Gets Knocked Up a Notch. 15, Spanish Fry. 14, Bender Should Not Be Allowed on TV. 13, Love and Rocket. 12, Less Than Hero. 11, A Taste of Freedom. 10, Crimes of the Hot. 9, Where No Fan Has Gone Before, 8, 300 Big Boys, 7, Teenage Mutant Leela's Hurdles, 6, Leela's Homeworld, 5, Jurassic Bark, 4, The Why of Fry, 3, The Farnsworth Parabox, 2, The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings, and 1, The Sting.
It's really close. It's
really
close, but in a really weird way, and you'll see why when I read mine.
All right, cool.
All right. Let's see. So we got 18, Ben-Hur. 17, Kif Gets Knocked Up a Notch. 16, A Taste of Freedom. 15, Crimes of the Hot. 14, Love and Rocket. 13, Bender Should Not Be Allowed on Television. 12, Less Than Hero. 11, Obsoletely Fabulous. 10, Spanish Fry. 9, 300 Big Boys. 8, Teenage Mutant Leela's Hurdles. 7, The Why of Fry. 6, Leela's Homeworld. 5, Where No Fan Has Gone Before. 4, Jurassic Bark. 3, The Farnsworth Paradox. 2, The Sting. 1, The Devil's Hands Idle Playthings.
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
Yeah, it's pretty close. It's like, I feel like our bottom half is all mixed up a little bit, but we're pretty much mostly bottom half, top half are the same, and we got a lot of similar stuff going on. I knew Devil's Hands was obviously going to be your top.
Some of these are like really, like the fact that we both somehow have Less Than Hero at 12 is really funny.
That is funny. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've talked about the season enough, especially, I mean, like in terms of these rankings, like I don't have any argument against your rankings. Like, I feel like a lot of the things that we have different are personal preference. And in general, this is like the most we've agreed, the closest we've agreed on a ranking in this whole run.
Right.
But I knew I had a feeling that our top 3 would be the same, because we both love all 3 of those so much. I knew Devil's Hands was going to be your number 1. But similar to you, Devil's Hands is your favorite episode of the whole show. I think The Sting is my favorite episode of the whole show.
It's a good one to be your favorite.
It's one that I feel like I always liked but overlooked for a long time. And I feel like in my more recent rewatches, I've said for years that The Luck of the Fryrish is my favorite episode of Futurama. And I think literally just on my more recent rewatches, after watching that one a few times, I was like, you know what? I think it's The Sting. The Sting is just, like you said, it's so cinematic. It's so unique. It caters to my sensibilities of like weird, trippy sci-fi stuff. And it's just like it's got such a strong emotional hook and incredible payoff with that reveal.
Yeah. That was one of the most difficult realizations for me on this last season rewatch, was like, wait, there are actual episodes that are better than The Luck of Fry. Like it was like, I was like, I was just like, objectively, this is one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. But like in watching The Sting and Devil's Hands again, I was like, oh shit. Like I love Luck of the Fryrish, but these are just like insultingly good. You know what I mean? Like I love these to death.
Let me ask you this. What do you think you could say what your 3 favorite episodes of this original run are and the whole thing?
I can actually, because 2 of them are here. It's Devil's Hands, The Sting, and Luck of the Fryrish. In that order, actually.
Mine is the Sting, Luck of the Fryrish, Devil's Hands. We got the same 3, different order.
We got the same 3.
Yep. We got the
We're
same
not
3.
too different after all.
Oh man. God, what a fun little mini series this has been. And now we're gonna move on. Yeah. We're gonna move on to something else before we eventually come back to cover the straight to DVD movies of Futurama. But next, we want to move outside the sci-fi adult animated comfort zone and move into a little show called Rick and Morty. That's a joke. It is funny we're doing another sci-fi one.
It's
that's
just
not
Hey
a gag.
Arnold. Rick and Morty's like Hey Arnold. It just takes place in a neighborhood. There's no there's no spaceships or anything like that. It's gonna be good.
I'm really excited though. We're both Rick and Morty fans. We figured this was a good time to do it because it's coming back for season 5 pretty soon. We also have 4 really awesome guests lined up. We're not going to reveal who they are yet, but we will let you know on the social media. But we're really excited to talk about Rick and Morty, especially if it, who knows, we get a little perspective shift watching it this time and talking about it with our friends.
Yeah.
I'm excited. So get excited for Rick and Morty. That's going to be a 4-episode miniseries. We're going to cover seasons 1 through 4, which is obviously all that exists right now. And then, we'll let you know what the next one is after that. But we have plans. We've got plans.
Yes,
I guess now's the sign off time. We got to tell them to do things. What are we got to call them to action, right?
We do, don't we? Make sure we get that rate on Apple Podcasts, because that apparently helps a lot. I don't really know how that stuff works, but it does.
Not just rate, but if you can write us a review, but 5 stars only.
Yeah. If there's anything lower, we don't want it.
Yes. We're happy. We're happy you have an opinion. We would like to not hear it, please. Thank you.
Right. Absolutely.
But that really helps us out. That helps kind of push that stuff into the Apple algorithm. We're also on Spotify, Stitcher, all of a bunch of podcast platforms. You can also find us on YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Comment and like it to help push us into the algorithm. We really appreciate you. Thanks to Mike Yunez, who's produced and edited this podcast. Thanks to Jakeneutron for our theme song. Thanks to Kerrifique for our art. And thanks to you, Tariq, for watching Futurama with me for a month.
Aw, thank you.
And thanks to the audience too. And we'll see you later.